Good morning. Welcome to the King's Report. I almost said the God's Day Report, but no, this is the King's Report for February 17th, 2018. This is the 9th year of Cheongi now, the first month and the second day. So a happy True God's Day to everyone, and let's have a wonderful year. This is the second day, the day after God's Day. And we're going to be covering a lot of news today. Robert Mueller, the special investigator, has finally come up with some indictments, 13 indictments, but they're all against the Russians and Russian organizations, and there's no mention of collusion. And in fact, there's a specific statement that Americans were basically duped into working with these Russians unwittingly. And so it seems to be pretty good news, it would seem, on the surface for President Trump. And also we have other news going on as well. We'll be going into some of the continuing aftermath from the Florida shooting. The left, of course, is going according to their script and calling on gun control for this. But I want to show you some statistics on the overall trend in violent crime in the United States. It's been going down a lot. It's been going down quite a bit over the last 25 years or so. So before we get into that, though, I want to show you a video that is from InfoWars. It's an InfoWars video, and the King asked me to show it during the broadcast today. And we'll show that and we'll talk about it. It's about a possible North Korea attack on Japan in the coming weeks. So if the tech team can play that now, go ahead.
North Korean chatter and preparations, both from human intelligence and signals, states that North Korea is at this time planning a preemptive strike against Japan, Tokyo, with ICBMs starting in the last 2 days of March going into April 2nd. So anywhere within that 4 or 5 day period. And that everyone, especially families of armed service members, should not be traveling and should not be leaving the United States during that period. And because they don't want to officially put that announcement out, they want that announcement put out to this audience because you are seen as the most awake, patriotic Americans.
If you are receiving this transmission, you are the resistance.
Okay, here's the bottom line. We have been in a state of war since 1950 with the dictatorship of North Korea. We are now facing the third hereditary leader of the Hermit Kingdom, as it is called, the most backwards, nightmarish, corrupt, starving, authoritarian, patriarchal, communist nightmare that the left thinks is so cute and funny, and that NBC and CBS and CNN, MSNBC have been defending and promoting. Now, I want to be clear. I don't want to have a war with the North Korean people. I want to be clear. I understand that they are casualties of this evil, culturally, spiritually, physically, mentally. That said, they're being used as a detonator by the Communist Chinese and others to project power and destabilization into the South China Sea. And now North Korea has been threatening for a long, long time to attack Japan, to attack South Korea, to attack the United States. The list goes on and on. Now they have atomic bombs and hydrogen bombs, thanks to the Clintons, the Communist Chinese, and others that gave them the reactors, the technology, the missile secrets, the rocket secrets, the engines. Now they've finally gotten better engines out of Ukraine from our allies, not the Russians. And so things have deteriorated, and they've been kicking the can down the road, as the president said. It's at the end of the road. And North Korea is now saying, we will preemptively strike you, we will kill you, we will destroy you. Well, when someone points a gun at you and says, we will attack you, we will destroy you, we will kill you, You have a right, when somebody's pointing a gun at you, to pull your gun and take them out. I don't want that to happen. I don't want to bring the communist Chinese in or the Russians. This is how you could end the world. But if North Korea attacks Seoul or North Korea attacks Japan, those are our allies, and civilization starts ending real quick. Because we'll be drawn into those wars. And that's how a conventional war, they believe within hours, will lead into a full-out war. Now, that said, I have talked to the personnel and the individuals at the highest levels below the president, and then at the levels where people would actually be attempting to go in on suicide missions to kill Kim Jong-un. And so a lot of what I'm saying is publicly available information, but I have repeatedly been told by different sources this, and then asked why I'm not talking about it on air, because they know the military and the general public that's thinking is listening. And so the highest levels of multiple U.S. intelligence agencies want you to know this. North Korean chatter and preparations, both from human intelligence and signals, states that North Korea is, at this time, planning a preemptive strike against Japan, Tokyo, with ICBMs starting in the last 2 days of March going into April 2nd. So anywhere within that 4 or 5 day period. And that everyone, especially families of armed service members, should not be traveling and should not be leaving the United States during that period. And because they don't want to officially put that announcement out, they want that announcement put out to this audience because you are seen as the most awake, patriotic Americans. End of that message. Continuing. As other sources have pointed out, the SpaceX launch of a month ago, not the recent one, the most recent, was carrying some type of high-tech electromagnetic pulse warhead or warheads that could take out North Korea preemptively. And Trump has said that's on the table. There's a lot of other secretive weapons in the whole fire and fury arsenal. But that North Korean chatter is not also just that they're planning a preemptive strike, which you hear them saying, we'll attack you any day, we will destroy you, the whole U.S. will be fire soon, we're going to hit you, that's a promise. I mean, I've got the stacks of articles, you've all heard it, seen it out of their official. But when it's internally going on, and they're saying that over the radio to their military, maybe their country's about to collapse. A lot of evidence shows they want to make the military think they're in such a crisis, they stay at their post because the food's running out or whatever. I don't know. And no one really does. Outside of Kim Jong-un's insane brain, but they're telling him that we are preparing the strike. We are preparing the first strike. We are preparing. Be ready by March 28th. We will launch the attack by April 2nd. So North Korea is saying that they're going to attack in the last few days of March into the first few days of April. And then North Korea is publicly saying, warning, Trump, very close preemptive strike, decision, World War III threat. So both sides are saying this back and forth. And then here's the other part. You've all heard about EMPs, and North Korea's threatened to hit the U.S. with an EMP, and I think some of that threat's overplayed unless they hit like Los Angeles. That would cause a chain reaction of power plants going out that could knock out large parts of the country and could take months or years to get them back on because it's already so tenuous. You see what happens with a few ice storms that only knock down a fraction of the power lines. It causes sometimes months of outages in areas. But the highest levels of the Pentagon, the highest levels of the CIA, they are telling people who've been in for decades and never heard anything like this, that North Korea is launching an attack by the end of March, early April, and that we have to then be ready to defend against it, and that we may strike them first. And again, I don't want to get on air as a family man or just as a human, period, and say things like this that in any way escalate things. But Kim Jong-un's already doing it, and everything they're saying in the news is what I'm getting from behind the scenes, and that they just hope this is some weird bluster internally to their forces. But they've told their population, roughly 20% of it's the military, one of the largest standing armies in the world, though it's somewhat Stone Age. Most of them are on foot. But they do have ICBMs. They do have chemical weapons. They do have tens of thousands of large artillery. And they can destroy South Korea very quickly, especially the capital, Seoul. They can attack Japan. But, I mean, they are reportedly sending out communications that they are intending a first strike. And I have asked, that's why I waited about a week or more, so I'm getting these in-person meetings and phone calls and other messages. Why am I being asked to say this to the public? And it's just, we just want your audience to know. So you sit there and you gauge that however you want, but that's real information. Whatever's meant by it gives me a headache even trying to figure it out. And I don't think the people give me the info, they don't know either. But some of these sources are the type of sources that say, I just talked to the hostage rescue team there, and this is what happened, and this is what's unfolding, and he went to the Middle East, and he's a gun dealer, and the Saudis were in town, and blah, blah, and then later it all comes out. And then I get a call from the hostage rescue team source saying, go ahead and go with it. And the media makes jokes about it, even though you can go back and see that turned out to be accurate. So this isn't from the FBI hostage rescue team. This is from way up above that. In the meeting rooms with the satellites and all the people and everything. And then it's just relayed. And people say, what am I supposed to do with that? Well, tell certain people. And tell them this. And people don't ask why. They say, yes, sir. And then I'm given the information. So, quite a time to be alive, ladies and gentlemen. We should be praying for peace here, but this is just crazy. And the absence of war doesn't mean war doesn't exist. The absence of nuclear war doesn't mean it exists. The longer we push it back, statistically, the better a chance it'll finally happen until they're eradicated. And I'm not even saying eradicated because they want the UN to be the only ones that have the nukes. I mean, it is just a serious situation. North Korea threatens electromagnetic pulse attack. Questions over lapses in U.S. grid raise security rise. Fox News. North Korea plotting to wipe out 90% of USA with deadly EMP bomb amid World War III scare. Express. That's them saying it. And the Pentagon says they believe they have a weapon and are targeting Los Angeles. And it'll knock everything out for 500 square miles and cause a chain reaction that could knock out half the country. And then it just goes on from there. Bloody nose. Strike on North Korea could begin with cyber attack by the U.S. We'll cover that when we come back. Merkel Phelan, Infowars.com. But this is not a drill, and what you got is real sources, real information from the highest levels. We'll be back.
You know, someone very profoundly once said many years ago that if fascism ever comes to America, it'll come in the name of liberalism.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
If you are receiving this transmission...
Okay, I think we can stop it there, Rio. Thank you. So that's a very interesting, very disturbing video. What he's saying is that the North Koreans are telling their own people, that is their own military, to be ready for a preemptive strike against Japan in the last few days of March and in the first couple of days of April. In one place he says the last 2 days of March, that would be March 30 and 31. But then in another place he says March 28th, beginning in March 28th, that would be 28, 29, 30, 31, April 1, April 2. That would be a 6-day period. So I don't know exactly what is the information that he received from his sources. But in any case, it's a video that gives rise to a number of questions. Of course, the first question that people might ask would be, why would North Korea strike Japan? Well, I think I can see a number of reasons. We've seen during the recent Olympics that North Korea's strategy is to create a positive public opinion for itself within South Korea. They did this by sending in Kim Jong-un's younger sister, who was a big hit among the leftist media and the leftist people in South Korea, as well as on CNN and other NBC and other U.S. media that really pandered to the North Korean dictators, and they've also sent in their cheerleading squad and stuff like that, and had of course NBC come and Lester Holt come to their ski resort or ski, I don't know if you call it a resort, but anyway, skiing facility there in North Korea, and had Lester Holt do a very good propaganda piece that I don't think they could have written that script any better themselves. And they really turned the Pyeongchang Olympics into something that I think will go down in Olympic history, together with the 1936 Berlin Olympics, which Hitler used for propaganda effect. And so as an extension of that policy, maybe North Korea, if North Korea is thinking, well, let's see, what else can we do? Once the Olympics are over, once the Paralympics are over, what else can we do to really create even more positive public opinion for ourselves and for our dictator Kim Jong-un in South Korea? And someone sitting around the table brainstorming might say, hey, you know what? Why don't we launch an attack against Japan? That'll do it. That'll really create a positive opinion for us in South Korea. Now, that may or may not be the case, but be mindful that North Korea often misjudges or appears to misjudge the public opinion and what happens with what the effect of their actions is. For example, in 1987? Yes, 1987. They blew up a passenger airliner and tried to stage it as though it was done by Japanese leftist radicals. Unfortunately for them, the perpetrator was caught, or one of the perpetrators was caught and interrogated and confessed. And of course, she's very well known now as among the media as the version bomber. Kim Young-hee, I think was her name. And this was done just before the South Korean election, a presidential election, and it was apparently intended to foment anti-Japanese feeling among the Korean electorate, and perhaps elect a more anti-Japanese candidate to the presidency. But it did not have that effect. And in fact, that was the election went to Roh Tae-woo at that time, who was a former army general and who was a part of the Chun Doo-hwan coup d'etat in 1979 and 80. So North Korea miscalculated, and they kind of the fact that their terrorists got caught was kind of inconvenient as well for them. So they may be miscalculating this time as well. But I can see very well how they would think that attacking Japan would bring positive public opinion in South Korea. They could think that. The specific reason, the specific excuse for attacking Japan, well, there's always stuff going on between Japan and Korea, and I'm sure they could find some convenient justification, some convenient reason for doing that. But where would they attack in Japan? Alex Jones mentions Tokyo, but I don't think that's very likely, because the purpose of attacking Japan, as opposed to Guam, for example, would be that Japan is less capable of retaliating. So the whole purpose, I think, in choosing Japan over the U.S. would be, first of all, I guess it's more within the limits of their technology, of their current technology, and second would be that the possibility that the U.S. might not retaliate, and they could think that as well. They don't necessarily have the best analysts in terms of international affairs, so I could see how they could think that way. But if they were to attack Tokyo, a lot of Americans would die. So probably they would not attack Tokyo. I would expect that they would attack some other region, perhaps even a remote place in Japan, because just the fact of landing a a rocket, even if it were unarmed, even if it did not have a warhead on it, just the fact of landing a rocket in Japan, someplace on Japanese territory, would accomplish the purpose of the positive opinion, public opinion within South Korea, and would be a kind of a bloody nose. It would be a real insult, at least if the warhead, if the cone were just completely empty, had nothing in it, it would still accomplish a lot for North Korea. And of course, if it had a biological agent or chemical agent or even a nuclear bomb or other type of bomb, a conventional bomb even, it would accomplish even more in terms of the positive public opinion within South Korea, according to their calculations. I'm not sure if that'll be true. I'm not saying that will be the effect. I'm saying that could well be North Korea's calculation. So. So where in Japan? Probably not Tokyo, probably not Okinawa, where the largest segment of U.S. troops are stationed. I think probably it could be some remote location within Japan, but or maybe a Japanese military base, a Japanese self-defense force base. Now, when that happens now, and I don't know how much the North Koreans have studied this, there is between Japan and the United States a treaty called the Treaty of Mutual Cooperation and Security between the United States and Japan. And this is the commonly known as the Mutual Defense Treaty between the U.S. and Japan. And this is a treaty that was signed in 1951 and has been revised and extended. And it's a very significant part of the U.S. policy in East Asia. And I'm looking at the Wikipedia page on that treaty right now, and it says, beginning with Article 1, the treaty established that each country would seek to resolve any international disputes peacefully. The treaty also gave prominence to the United Nations in dealing with aggression. Article 5, which dealt with armed attacks by a third party, this would be an armed attack by a third party if North Korea were to actually land a ballistic missile in Japan. By the way, he says, Alex Jones says ICBM. ICBM, of course, means intercontinental ballistic missile. So this would not have to be an ICBM. It would be an intermediate range ballistic missile. I think it would be the more accurate. So, and I think that's abbreviated as IRBM, not as ICBM. But anyway, it would be an attack by a third party. Even if the cone is empty, even if that cone of the missile is empty, it would still be an attack by a third party. And Article 5, which dealt with armed attacks by a third party, required that the United Nations Security Council be involved and that any measures taken by the U.S. and Japan be ceased, so forth. Let's see. Yes. I want to make sure one thing here. Any measures taken by the U.S. and Japan be ceased when the Security Council of the United Nations has taken the measures necessary to restore and maintain international peace and security. Further, Article 10 allowed for the abrogation of the treaty if both parties agreed that the United Nations has made satisfactory arrangements to provide for the stability of peace and security in the Japan area, i.e., if and when the United States system of collective security is in effect. Now, this, the original idea with the United Nations, which has not worked out, was that there would be kind of a global security system, the presence of the Soviet Union on the Security Council has sort of blown that up to bits. But the original idea was that the elite would establish this global security system that would make this kind of a treaty unnecessary. That's actually not at all true today. That has not worked out in terms of that part of the elite's plan has not worked out. Russia also is not cooperating with that kind of thing at all. Under the treaty, both parties assumed an obligation to maintain and develop their capacities to resist armed attack in common and to assist each other in case of armed attack on territories under Japanese administration. Now, territories under Japanese administration would include territories that are kind of disputed. For example, the Sankaku Islands, for example, where there is a dispute between Japan and China over the territorial whose territory those islands belong to. These are islands that are at the very, very southern part of the Japanese archipelago, actually at the end, very southern part of the prefecture of Okinawa, just north, very close to Taiwan, actually, to the island of Taiwan. So, even though there's a dispute about those islands, this treaty doesn't get into whose islands those are, but they are under Japanese administration, so they come within these treaties, for example. And that could be an interesting target for North Korea, because then that would also, no, that wouldn't work, because China claims that as their territory, so they would consider that an attack against Chinese territory. So that is, okay, so strike that. Take that back. Senkaku Islands, probably off the list of targets. So anyway, the point here is that to resist armed attack in common and to assist each other in case of armed attack on territories under Japanese administration. So if North Korea were to attack Japan in this way, as Alex Jones is saying, under this treaty, the United States would become involved. And there would be a very strong demand from the Japanese government that the United States retaliate against North Korea on behalf of Japan. Or, well, Japan does have a kind of retaliatory capability, but I don't know how much. I don't know if Japan has the capability to actually make a major strike against North Korea's land. They could, retaliate, say, by, I don't know, blowing up a North Korean ship or something like that. And they have fighters and so forth. They have a helicopter carrier, but I think it would be very difficult for Japan to mount a significant retaliation against North Korea. So Japan would be putting pressure on the United States to retaliate on its behalf under this treaty. So that would create an interesting situation because, as de Gaulle, former president of France, said, he was questioning the credibility of NATO by saying, would the United States sacrifice New York in order to protect Paris? And here, that situation would arise here. Would the United States sacrifice Los Angeles in order to protect Tokyo? Or Hawaii in order to protect Tokyo? Because if the United States retaliates against North Korea on behalf of Japan, then North Korea has the excuse that it needs to retaliate against U.S. forces, U.S. Military in South Korea, and it could also attack Seoul in that case. So, would the United States public support politically a retaliation against North Korea by U.S. military? Maybe North Korea's calculation is that this kind of attack against Japan could drive a wedge between the United States and Japan. Perhaps this treaty would be put to test, won't it? It'll be the first time that this treaty will be tested in that kind of a scenario where Japan is attacked by a third party, and the U.S. is called on to defend Japan. And that might be the calculation that the North Koreans are making. North Korea has staged military provocations in the past. for example, recently Vice President Pence visited the memorial to the Cheonanham in South Korea. That was a South Korean naval vessel that was blown up by the North Koreans by torpedo, I think, or I believe by torpedo. And South Korea did not retaliate against that. North Korea fired some artillery shells against a South Korean island, killed a few people, including one or two civilians. This was also a few years back, within the last 10 years, and also South Korea did not retaliate. So North Korea is always pushing the envelope to seeing, can we get away with this? Okay, then we did get away with that. No, we got no retaliation. So can we get away with this? What about with this? So this would be a pretty significant step in pushing that envelope. But this may be another step in seeing, what can we get away with? What can we get away with? And perhaps China is also backing this, because it would be if the U.S. chooses not to retaliate against North Korea, then that would completely undermine the credibility of the U.S.-Japan Defense Treaty. And on the one hand, that would mean that Japan would develop its own nuclear capability, its own military capability, which is already pretty significant. But on the other hand, it would mean that the U.S. presence in Asia would be called into question. If U.S. does not retaliate against North Korea, then the Japanese would say, wait a second, we've got all these U.S. troops here on our land, and we allow that even though they are occupying our territory. They sometimes rape our women and children, and that's causes all kinds of problems. And we have a lot of crime associated with U.S. servicemen. I'm not saying that that's actually true, but this is what they will say. I'm not saying this is what the Japanese will say. But if these troops in Japan, they will say, if these troops in Japan are only here for U.S. interests, then aren't they an occupying force as opposed to being a mutual defense force? Aren't we simply being occupied by the U.S. military? If these forces are only here to serve U.S. interests and not Japanese interests, then they're an occupying force, and we need, as a sovereign nation, we need to have them leave. I think that would be a reaction by quite a significant population in Japan if the U.S. does not retaliate against North Korea. So this would serve Chinese interests of, China wants Japan, of course, off the Korean Peninsula, but also out of Japan, because they want to be the regional overlord of East Asia. Of course, if there is this attack in Japan, there will be an explosion of anti-Korean sentiment within Japan, and that could go many, many ways. In the early 20th century, there was a major earthquake in the Tokyo area, and in the aftermath, the rumor got around that the Korean population in Japan was poisoning the wells or something like that, and or there were all sorts of rumors, sort of anti-Korean rumors going around, and as a result of that, Japanese people rose up and massacred a large number of Koreans. Something like that could happen again. So this would be a major event if it were to happen, and it would be a major event in many ways. And the Trump administration would be put into a very difficult position. If it acts against North Korea, then it invites retaliation against the South Korea and U.S. forces, both in South Korea and in Guam and in Japan. If it does not act, it will undermine the credibility of the U.S.-Japan Security Treaty and basically demolish the rationale for a U.S. presence in Japan and in perhaps in any other country as well. I mean, if North Korea attacks Japan and the U.S. does not act, what would that do to NATO? What would that do to U.S. commitments to all the other 150 countries or so where we have a troop stationed right now? I think it would completely demolish that, the rationale for all of those agreements. So really the Trump administration will be placed between a rock and a hard place. So if Alex Jones is really reporting something that is actually, I don't think he's actually making this up. I don't say that, but sometimes reporters get taken advantage of. Sometimes people in the intelligence agencies will give you a piece of information which is not true, and they know that it's not true, but they just want to have it go out there as a kind of a trial balloon to see how people will react to this alleged information. People in intelligence agencies do that. I was a victim of that kind of a thing once. It happens, all right? It happens. So I don't doubt the sincerity of Alex Jones in reporting this. So the question is the credibility or the sincerity of the people who are feeding him this information. We don't know. And the interesting thing about this video is that the King saw it last night, and he texted me and instructed me to show it during the King's Report this morning. So I went on InfoWars to try to find the video, and I couldn't find it. And so I finally found it by going onto YouTube and searching on YouTube. I did a search on YouTube, and it's here, and it's actually published on YouTube not by Alex Jones, but by something called the Free Press. It was published on February 16, 2018, so it was published yesterday. Now, the YouTube view count says it has 11 views. Before we showed it, it was saying 10 views. Now, YouTube fiddles with its view numbers, and it admits that. It acknowledges that openly. Their excuse is that they want to confirm the validity of they want to confirm the validity of views to make sure they're not getting fraudulent views before they actually show the views on the view count. So there may be a lot more than 11 views on this, and YouTube is holding it back. That's possible. But then it's interesting that it only has 11 views. And then the title of the video is, if you want to find it yourself, Alex Jones News, U.S. Intel North Korea planning preemptive strike between March 28th and April 2nd. That's the title of the video that I just showed you on YouTube that has been published by something called the Free Press. So you can go and look at it yourself and decide what you think about it. But hey, probably if you're planning on going to Japan between March 28th and April 2nd, maybe a good idea to kind of change that plan. I would advise that. Maybe not a good idea to be in Japan between those two dates. I would wait and see what happens. As this video, perhaps, I don't know why it's not on. Maybe someone else can find it on the InfoWars site. I couldn't find it. So the question then is, if it's not on, obviously it's Alex Jones there. I mean, it's not someone else sitting there. And obviously InfoWars made this video. So if it's not on their site, then why isn't it on there? So why haven't they put this on their site? Did they publish it and then take it off? And if so, why? Or I don't know. It's an interesting thing. Did someone pressure them to take it off? I don't know. Maybe there will be an explanation on that later from InfoWars itself. Or maybe it's my fault. Maybe I just couldn't find it. Maybe it's there and I couldn't find it. But I looked pretty, I think I looked pretty thoroughly, but I couldn't find it. But, you know, I make mistakes. Sometimes things are right before my eyes. Where's the Bible? Where's the Bible? It's right before yours. You know, or where are my glasses? Where are my glasses? You know, it's right on my face. But that happens. I'll admit that. But I don't know. But if it's not on InfoWars, then why isn't it there? Was it there and it was taken down? Did they not put it up there in the first place? Only put it on YouTube? I don't know. All right, so that's a very disturbing video, to say the least. Disturbing. And I think at the minimum, we should not plan to be in Japan between March 28th and April 2nd. Probably even after that, I would certainly wait and see. If you got stuff to do in Japan, get it done before March 28th. That's what I would say. All right, let's take a break, and we'll be back with other news from a Chonu perspective. And we'll do our REMA at 6 o'clock.
There was a lot of things I really liked about Diella from the very beginning. You know, I loved her passion, the way she sang to the church, the loyalty she had to her parents, and you know, I really wanted somebody who's loyal to True Father, and I knew if she's loyal to her parents, that's a good sign. And the one memory I really have, it really helped me really decide I really want to get blessed to her, was she said that I'd always be second. And she'd always put God before me, and I knew if she was willing to put God before me, I could like fully trust her, and that was something that really moved me to, like, I knew at that point, like, I wanted to get blessed to her.
Okay, so at first when we met, we completely put each other in boxes, the famous box, and I don't know, I was praying and praying and praying, and I was just not sure in the beginning. We both weren't, and but we just continued talking, and but for some reason it just didn't seem to work, because we were just too focused on ourselves, I think. So, but I kept praying and praying, and then one day I was very frustrated, and I even talked with my mom, and she told me, you know what, Diella, I can see he really loves God, and if he loves God, he can fully love you. And I think that's what I needed to hear, and from that moment on, everything changed.
Welcome back to the King's Report for February 17th, 2018, 9th year of Chungi, first month and second day. And another happy True God's Day to you all out there. And I want to thank everyone for watching the King's Report during the previous year, the 8th year of Chungi. And I hope that you will continue to do so during the upcoming 9th year. Yesterday, we had Pastor Jaggers. What was his first name? I've forgotten his first name. Pastor Jaggers got his card, but I don't have it with me now. here, and he was asking me, what does a chianggi mean? And first I didn't understand what he's talking about, but then he's trying to say chungi. And I explained to him that, well, this is the ninth year of our church's calendar. In Korea, you have the seogi, which is means a Western calendar or Western standard, and that's what in the West we refer to as AD. In other words, this is AD 2018. So in Korean, it would be seogi 2018. So in our church's calendar, we instead of seogi, which means Western, so means Western, we have chungi. Chun, of course, meaning heaven. I'm sure you've heard the phrase or the syllable chun a lot before, because chun meaning heaven, of course, Cheonilguk Chun, the Cheonbokgung Chun, that was the large church in Seoul where the king was a senior pastor. Cheonilgung here in Pennsylvania, et cetera, et cetera. Chun occurs a lot. That means heaven. And so this is the heavenly calendar, and this is the ninth year now, heavenly calendar, because Father established that calendar in 2010. Now I know that the Family Federation has, after Father's passing, they said, okay, we can get rid of what Father did, so we want to have a new age, so they've changed it. They have a different counting, different calendar. But we are continuing the calendar that Father established in 2010, which is the Chungi calendar. And this is yesterday was the first day of the Chungi calendar, in the ninth year of that calendar. This segment, I want to go into the continuing sort of repercussions from the massacre, you could say, at the high school in Parkland, Florida, where 17 people died. Fortunately, we don't see an increase in that death toll. I really want to thank the doctors and nurses who are caring for the injured, that they are able to, and really thank God that they are able to treat those who have been injured, so that the death toll is not increasing. That's really, 17 is way, way, way more. That's more than we want, and 0 is what we want. So this is and I really feel for the families and the friends, the colleagues of those who have died. I really feel their pain. But one thing, though, that the media is being irresponsible, and the leftists are being irresponsible, is connecting this situation to a perceived proliferation of guns. And there is a large amount of guns in the United States, but the Pew Research Center, and Tech Team can now bring up that webpage that I sent you the link to. The Pew Research Center at the end of January, as it happens, put out a post called 5 Facts About Crime in the U.S. And I want to go through that right now. Donald Trump made crime fighting an important focus of his campaign for president, and he cited it during his January 2017 inaugural address. As the administration takes steps to address violence in American communities, here are 5 facts about crime in the United States. Number 1, violent crime in the U.S. has fallen sharply over the past quarter century. Now, the number of guns in the United States has gone up, but we see number of guns going up, but violent crime, not just murders, but this would include rape and all sorts of crimes committed with a weapon. That crime has gone down in the United States, and it says sharply over the United States over the past quarter century. The 2 most commonly cited sources of crime statistics in the U.S. both show a substantial decline in the violent crime rate since it peaked in the early 1990s. One is an annual report by the FBI of serious crimes reported to police in approximately 18,000 jurisdictions around the country. The other is an annual survey of more than 90,000 households conducted by the Bureau of Justice Statistics, which asks Americans age 12 and older whether they were victims of crime, regardless of whether they reported those crimes to the police. So crime rates have fallen since the 1990s. You can see there that the violent crimes per 100,000 residents, according to the FBI, has fallen from 747.1 in 1993 as per 100,000 residents to 386.3. So that's almost half, isn't it? Almost down to half. Violent crimes per 1,000 people ages 12 and above BUS, this is, of course, I guess, whether they reported it or not, that has fallen from 79.8 to 21.1. This is per 1,000 people, ages 12 up, whether this was reported or not. So this would include a lot of stuff that's not in the FBI statistics, and that also has gone down. And that's gone down way more than half, almost down to almost a third, isn't it? Yeah. And then property crimes per 100,000 residents. Now, property crimes are not violent crimes because, means someone steals my cell phone or something like that. That kind of crime. That's also down a lot. Property crimes per 100,000 households, according to the FBI and according to the Bureau of Statistics. Okay. So we see that crime is down a lot over the past 25 years. Violent crime is down a lot. Property crime has declined significantly over the long term. Okay, and then public perception about crime is in the U.S. often doesn't align with the data. Gee, I wonder why. Isn't it because the media is trying to create this view, this myth that there's a lot of crime, that crime is getting worse? That would seem to be the case to me. There's some local television stations have the saying, if it bleeds, it leads. If it bleeds, it leads. In other words, if you can get, a film of someone in a traffic accident or not like that, and if you can have blood in the film, if it bleeds, then it leads. Then that will be the top story on the nightly news. That's what some television journalists like to say. Public perception about crime in the U.S. often doesn't align with the data. So people have the perception that there's a lot more crime going on than is actually happening. There are large geographic variations in crime rates. Wow, isn't that interesting? For example, Chicago and Northeast Pennsylvania. There's a big variation there, isn't there? Yeah. Chicago has a very tight gun control, and they have high crime. And in Northeast Pennsylvania, we have very loose gun control, and there's a lot less crime. Gee, isn't that interesting? The FBI's data shows big difference from state to state and city to city. In 2016, there were more than 600 violent crimes per 100,000 residents in Alaska, Nevada, New Mexico, and Tennessee. By contrast, Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont had rates below 200 violent crimes per 100,000 residents. And while Chicago has drawn widespread attention for its soaring murder total in recent years, its murder rate in 2016, 28 murders and non-negligent manslaughter per 100,000 residents, was less than half of the rate in St. Louis. Whoa! So, yeah, all right, St. Louis is even worse, and far below the rate of Baltimore. We've heard about Baltimore recently. The FBI notes that various factors might influence a particular area's crime rate, including its population density and economic conditions. And I would also add to that its gun laws. Yeah, gun laws. And number 5, most crimes are not reported to police, and most reported crimes are not solved. Now that's an interesting thing. That would be another justification for more peace police, wouldn't it? In its annual survey, BJS asked victims of crime whether they reported that crime to the police. In 2016, only 42% of violent crimes tracked by BJS was reported to police, and the much more common category of property crime, only about a third was reported. Yeah, you get something stolen. What are you going to report it to the police for? They're not going to do anything. They're not going to find the criminal. You got to, especially if it's just property crime. If your cell phone got stolen, you're going to report that to the police? Go out and buy a new cell phone. There are a variety of reasons crime might not be reported, including a feeling that police would not or could not do anything to help, or that the crime is a personal issue and too trivial to report, according to BJS. Most of the crimes that are reported to police, meanwhile, are not solved, at least using an FBI measure known as the clearance rate. That's the share of cases each year that are closed or cleared through the arrest, charging, and referral of a suspect for prosecution. In 2016, police nationwide cleared 46% of violent crimes that were reported to them. For property crimes, the national clearance rate was 18%. See? 18%. So that shows that. Now, so if it's not guns, so if we shouldn't be focusing on guns, where should we be focusing? Well, Breitbart has a, no, I'm sorry, this is a article that was linked on Drudge. It's a WND article. That's a World News Daily article. And they say media ignoring one crucial factor in Florida school shooting. Guns, depression, trouble cited, but key information is not yet disclosed. Wow, what is that key information? Here we go again. A horrific mass shooting occurs. Everyone is in shock and grief. Democrats blame guns and Republicans. Pundits urge the public, if you see something, say something. And everyone asks why. As information about the perpetrator emerges, a relative confides to the newspaper that the troubled youth who committed the mass murder was on psychiatric medications. You know, those powerful, little understood, mind-altering drugs with fearsome side effects, including suicidal ideation and even homicidal ideation, in quotes. Yet the predictable response from the press is always the same. Not only a total lack of curiosity, but disdain for any who ask the question, as though connecting psychiatric meds to mass shootings is pursuing a conspiracy theory. Here's a good way to tell whether or not something is a conspiracy theory. If it's true, it's not a conspiracy theory. In the case of Nicholas Cruz, the 19-year-old Florida mass shooter, his mother's sister, Barbara Kumbatovich, told the Miami Herald that she believed Cruz was on medication to deal with his emotional fragility. This is strikingly similar to reports that after the 2013 school massacre in Newton, Connecticut, when Mark and Louise Tambas, family friends of shooter Adam Lanza and his mother were interviewed on CBS 60 Minutes, during which Louise Tambas told 60 Minutes, during which told correspondent Scott Pelley, I know he was on medication and everything, but she homeschooled him at home because he couldn't deal with the school classes sometimes, so she just homeschooled Adam at home, and that was her life. And here she tells ABC News, I knew he was on medication, but that's all I know. But there was little journalistic curiosity or follow-up, and one wonders whether that will be the case this time around. But you may well be asking, why is the issue of psychiatric medications even important? Fact, a disturbing number of perpetrators of school shootings and similar mass murders in our modern era were either on or just recently coming off of psychiatric medications. A few of the most high-profile examples, one of many others, include Columbine mass killer Eric Harris was taking Luvox, like Prozac, Paxil, Zoloft, Effexor, and many others, a modern and widely prescribed type of antidepressant drug called selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, or SSRIs. Harris and fellow student Dylan Klebold went on a hellish school shooting rampage in 1999, during which they killed 12 students and a teacher and wounded 24 others before turning their guns on themselves. Luvox manufacturer Solvay Pharmaceuticals concedes that during short-term controlled clinical trials, 4% of children and youth taking Luvox, that's 1 in 25, developed mania, a dangerous and violence-prone mental derangement characterized by extreme excitement and delusion. Patrick Purdy went on a schoolyard shooting rampage in Stockton, California in 1989, which became the catalyst for the original legislative frenzy to ban semi-automatic assault weapons in California and the nation. Let's see, another case here. Kip Kinkel, 15, murdered his parents in 1998, and the next day went to school and opened fire on his classmates, killing 2 and wounding 22. In 1988, it has a whole list of things here, and they were all on these drugs or were just coming off of them. So why this is the this seems to be a common denominator. So why isn't there more uproar about these medications? And why does everyone turn to the guns? Well, the guns are an easy target because they're the more visible. But as we saw in the Pew Research things, the increased proliferation of guns has coincided with a drastic decline in violent crime in the United States. But on the other hand, the increased proliferation of psychiatric drugs, the increased amount of drugs being prescribed, coincides with what looks like an increase in these mass shootings. So where should our logic take us? Not our emotions, but our logic. should take us to take a much closer look at these psychiatric drugs, you would think. But that's not happening. Oh, why is that? Oh, wow. It looks like one thing that people coming to the United States from overseas, you sit down and you start watching television here, right? And one thing you immediately notice here, coming from almost any other country, I think, you immediately notice, I've noticed this and I've heard other people notice it as well, is the incredible amount of advertising on U.S. television by pharmaceutical companies. It is. I don't know. You're probably used to it in America, but I noticed it. Other people coming here from other countries also tell me the same thing. So there's a lot of pharmaceutical money going into the media. Is that a reason? Well, I think the media need to tell us. Why aren't they pursuing this angle of the psychiatric drugs and the connection with mass shootings? Why aren't they doing that? Why aren't they more curious? And also, congressmen, a lot of pharmaceutical money goes into Congress, into campaigns. Does that have anything to do with the fact that Congress does not have much curiosity about the relationship between the proliferation of psychiatric drugs and the mass shootings that have been going on? Is there a connection there? Well, Congress doesn't care. They're not asking that question. I think we should care. But already I think guns are off the hook because we see that the increased number of guns shows a decrease in violent crime in the United States. So one thing we know we should not be doing is attacking guns that are held by good people illegally. But that is what the media is doing right now. All right, let's take a break, and we'll come back with our rimas from the Bible and Chen Sung-kyung. Very interesting verse, very interesting rima I had this morning from Hebrews, chapter 11. We'll get into that after a 5-minute break.
Just like a drum, I can hear the hearts beating.
Welcome back to the King's Report for Saturday, February 17th, 2018, 9th year of Chungi, first month and second day. Yes, this is the second day of the new year on the heavenly calendar. Happy New Year, happy God's Day, happy True Father's birthday. He was actually, of course, born on the 6th day of the first month by the lunar calendar, and the heavenly calendar follows the lunar calendar. But Father instructed us to celebrate his birthday on the first day of the year together with God's Day. The King also decided that it would be appropriate for us to celebrate Jesus' birthday on the same day, of course, because in spirit world, Father and Jesus are one. And they, basically it's the... I like to put it this way, that 2,000 years ago, the Word became flesh, that was Jesus, and then in 1920, the Word became flesh once again, and that was True Father. So it is the same Word, it is the same, they come from the same God and the same origin. And Father himself said that there's no reason to make a distinction between himself and God. So it is appropriate for us to celebrate those three events on three aspects on God's Day. That is to say, God's Day, to celebrate God, to celebrate True Father, and to celebrate Jesus as well. My Rima this morning comes from Hebrew chapter 11, starting at verse 11 and going to verse 14. Through faith also Sarah herself received strength to conceive seed, and was delivered of a child when she was past age, because she judged him faithful who had promised. Therefore sprang there even of one, and him as good as dead, so many as the stars of the sky in multitude, and as the sand which is by the sea shore innumerable. These all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them far off, and were persuaded of them, and embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. For they that say such things declared plainly that they seek a country. For they that say such things declare plainly that they seek a country. Wow, God has really guided me to a wonderful verse this morning, that they seek a country. Of course, in yesterday's Hyung reading as well, Father talked about the necessity of a sovereign country. Now, the Vatican, for example, is a sovereign country. It is under international law. It has its own territory. It has its own boundaries within Rome, and it has countries send ambassadors to the Holy See, and the Holy See also sends ambassadors to other countries. So under international law, it is a country. But we don't have that. Father does not have that. But if there were such a country, even if it were small, like the Holy See, the point in yesterday's reading was that then we could be registered in that. We could be registered in that country. Having a country means that you can have nationality. Right now, I am a citizen of the United States, but that citizen, of course, the United States was created by God as an important part of His providence. But still, it is not God's kingdom. It is not God's kingdom. It is not ruled by God's lineage, and it's not ruled according to governed according to God's plan. But if we had a country, like even a small country like the Vatican, we could at least be registered in that country. I could be a citizen of that country, and my birth could be registered in that country. And my marriage could be registered in that country. And when I die, that death could be registered in that country. And that is the registration that Father explained to us yesterday through the Hyung reading. That is the registration. So we need to work, continue to work to have a country. And as the Rima explains here, also those that the Jewish people following Abraham were working to have their own sovereign country. They were in Egypt for a long time, but then God led them out of Egypt and into the land of Israel, so that they could have their own sovereign country. If a country were not necessary, he could have just left them in Israel, in Egypt, I'm sorry. He could have just left them in Egypt. They could have worshipped him in Egypt, and they could have had sort of their spiritual kingdom there, in Egypt. But no, what God wanted to have an actual sovereign country. And that is something that has still not been fulfilled to this time. That there be a country that is actually governed by a king who is in True Father's direct lineage, and governed according to the Chanuguk Constitution, which God has given us through the second king. So that is really a tremendous rima that this morning, following on yesterday's Hundok reading. That in verse 14, for they that say such things declare plainly that they seek a country. Bam. Yeah. Thank you, Heavenly Father. Now in the Cheonseongyong, I'm in the first book of Cheonseongyong, on the true God, chapter 1 and section 4. And the section heading is God is our Father. Okay, so far so good in the translation. But then in the 4.1, the heading in English becomes God and human beings are related as parent and child. This is a point where I really repent. I really deeply repent that in translating Father's words, I was a part of this, and other translators were as well, still are, I guess, to translate puja as a parent-child. And this was a mistake, and it was a terrible sin, and I really repent of this. Puja does not mean parent and child. Puja means father and son. Pu means father, cha means son. Now, and that mistake has caused a lot of non-Korean speaking American members and European members and other Western members, and I could say, "Hey, it's your own fault. You didn't learn Korean," and I do say that. but and if I'm called to account on Judgment Day, I will say that. Yeah, hey, they have to share in their responsibility. I mean, they could have avoided this by learning Korean themselves. And I will say that. But at the same time, I bear a great responsibility for this mistranslation of puja as a parent and child. It's not parent and child, it's father and son. So the heading here should be, God and human beings are related as father and son. And people will say, well, wait a second, how come you're leaving out daughters? How come you're leaving out daughters? But you can ask that, and you can study that, and you can pray about that, but we have to go with what Father actually says, not what we think Father should have said, or what he might have meant. We have to go with what Father actually said. But anyway, let me read a few paragraphs from this section on God and human beings are related as father and son. God and human beings are related as father and son. Again, here, so every time I say father and son here, and I'm going to be correcting the translation as I go along. God and human beings are related as father and son, but how did this relationship come to be? If you enter a mystical state and ask what the center of the universe is, you will get the answer that it is the father-son relationship. Here, you see, they've translated it parent-child relationship. This is how the Han mother can get away with what she's doing. This is one of the reasons. This is why, American members and other non-Korean speaking, all right, so it was your own fault, right, for not learning Korean, but this is how she can get away with that, with people like, what's his name, Tom Walsh, who should know better, falls for this kind of thing because he doesn't speak Korean. Who you will get the answer that if you ask what is the center of the universe, you will get the answer. It is not parent-child relationship. It is the father-son relationship. That is the Father saying that is the center of the universe. All right. What is the center of the universe? In short, it is the father-son relationship. The father-son relationship. That is the center of the universe. Father. If you pray and ask God what is the center of heaven and earth and what is the root of the universe, he will say that it is the relationship between a father and his sons and daughters. You see here, here in the Korean, okay, here it does say 아들, 딸의 관계. All right, so here father specifically includes daughters, all right? So you don't have to feel bad, okay? He will say that it is a relationship between a father and his sons and daughters, the parent-child. But then it goes to 아버지 관계, but it is the father, not parent-child, but at least here say father-child relationship. It's not parent-child, all right? Because he includes daughters, but he does not include mothers, all right? It is the father and son and daughter. He says 아들, 딸. So here you can translate it as a son and daughter. But still there's no mother there, all right? So it is the father-child relationship. You can go do that, go that far, but not parent-child relationship. People who are ignorant of this will think that this refers to the relationship between a physical father and mother and their sons and daughters, but we are talking about the fundamental relationship with God. So this is a fundamental relationship with God. So none of this, heavenly mother stuff, none of this heavenly parent stuff, we're crying out loud. Stop that. Just stop it, all right? Because it's completely unbiblical, it is unprincipled, and there's no foundation for it. There's absolutely no foundation for that kind of nonsense. Just stop it. I can't even go on. I'm sorry. So anyway, that's that. All right, let's take a break. Let's take a break and we'll come back. I'm sorry, I really repent. And probably the purpose of this Rima this morning was to have me repent before you. All right, let's come back in a minute or so with more news.
It's a blessing of marriage, but the blessing of marriage is supposed to be full of joy unspeakable.
I mean, the blessing itself is amazing. I mean, it was a very special experience. I mean, it was the biggest day of my life, and we had all our family there. People came from all the way from Colorado. This one couple even from Colorado came last minute. They took a bus to get here, and I just felt so much love from friends, family. I felt God's love. I mean, I just couldn't believe that I was getting blessed. That day finally came, and I was just totally peaceful and excited, and it was an amazing experience.
Well, for me, there was one particular moment. First of all, the whole ceremony, I did not have one moment the feeling it was about us. Mm-hmm. It was literally about true Father giving. He was the walking God on earth, giving us the blessing which we all did not. We don't deserve, basically. And it was just so beautiful to receive that, and I felt a lot of love. And there was also a moment where Hyung was saying, "True Father is smiling," and I think he said that 3 times, and I could see that, not physically, but I could just feel him being happy, which really calmed me down and made me peaceful and happy, and it was beautiful.
Welcome back to the King's Report for Saturday, February 17th, 2018, the 9th year of Chungi, first month and second day. Let's look at some of the other headlines that are on Drudge and other aggregating sites this morning. There's a lot of headlines about the Florida school shooting. I like to call it the Florida massacre because it really was a massacre. And the reason it was a massacre is because there was no one else there, apparently, who could stop him. No one else there with a gun. Now, I was watching Fox News, and I saw that the superintendent of schools there for Broward County mentioned that there are 2 police cars assigned to every school in Broward County. But there's been no mention of that in the. I have not seen the mention of that in the coverage that I've been looking at. I want to know what were those? Were there actually, police cars? Or is it just cars, or were there actually personnel there? Every time I go up 507 here, or US 6, I notice at our high school here in Wayne County, there's always a police car, police cruiser parked in front of the school in a very prominent location where you can easily see it from the road, but it's always empty. And I wonder, is there actually a police officer in that school, or is that car that's just there for show? In other words, does he park the car there and go someplace else, go back to the station, for example? I sometimes wonder. I don't know. So I want to know, were there actually police officers present in the school when the shooting began? And police officers who are always present there on every school day. When my children went to school in Northern Virginia, they had what was called a resource officer, a police officer, and there was a police officer stationed in our school, in the high school there. This was not long after the Columbine school shooting, and so there was more emphasis on that kind of thing back then. But anyway, I just want to know what was the role of what role did those police cars play? What role did any police officers who were in the school at the time play when this began? But if the faculty, who have concealed carry permits, could have been carrying their guns at the school at that time, perhaps they could have stopped this. The Florida, the football coach who threw himself in front of the killer to protect students and died himself. Perhaps if he had a gun on him, perhaps instead of throwing himself in front of the gun, the killer's gun, he could have pulled his own gun and taken the killer down. And I say the word "take down" not as a euphemism for kill, because you're putting him down and you are incapacitating him. It does not necessarily mean that you're killing him. His life could still be saved, especially if the good guy doing the shooting has first aid skills and equipment on hand. He can be put down and then treated on the spot. But it really is important for us to get into the mindset that when there is this kind of thing, the teachers and administrators who are there are the first responders. The football coach, he was the first responder. He was there. But the only thing he could do was to throw himself in front of the bullets and take the bullets himself instead of the students. That's all he could do, because he had no gun on him. He had no weapon on him. And I think that's a tragedy. There's an article on Breitbart this morning that Colorado now allows the teachers and administrators to carry weapons in the school. I think that was on Breitbart, wasn't it? I don't see it right now. I was looking at it earlier. So as to prevent another Columbine. And I think that's a policy that should be instituted nationwide. Here in Pennsylvania, it's illegal for us to carry our weapons onto any K-12 campus. And so even if I'm going to the elementary school nearby here to attend for example, in November I attended a Veterans Day event there that was held in the auditorium of the elementary school. And I had to disarm myself before going in there. And I think that's wrong. I think that's wrong. I don't think that I should have to disarm myself. In fact, you know, if I go into an elementary school campus with my weapon, I'm you know, I'm there as a potential first responder in the case of that anything might happen. And also, just making schools gun-free zones simply means that we are creating this incredible vulnerability. Think about it. Think about it. What are the safest places in the United States? Where would be one of the safest places? I would say the White House is a pretty safe place. You know, don't you think so? The chance of a mass shooting occurring inside the White House is pretty low, don't you think? Why is that? Well, because you got the Secret Service there with their guns. Another very safe place would be the Capitol building, don't you think? Now, there have been, you know, a couple of incidents inside the Capitol building where, you know, I think, what was it, a short time ago, last year I think it was, maybe the year before, some guy got past security with a gun or something like that. But it's very, very rare. It's a very safe place because it's protected with guns. Don't you think so? Yeah. What are the safe places? Think about it. What are the safe places? They are places that are protected with guns. On the other hand, schools are not protected with guns. And we see a lot of mass shootings there. But the left right now is reacting just emotionally. Well, they're causing people to react emotionally. I would say that they are reacting in a very calculated way. People like Obama, people like Hillary Clinton, others, they have their agenda, which they are carrying out. They have their script that they bring out after each shooting like this. And they go through the script. And it is a script with a purpose, and that is to disarm the American public. Why are they trying to do that? I'll leave it up to you to decide that. But here's an example, perhaps an extreme example, but still an example of someone of a progressive ilk reacting emotionally and the kind of ridiculous extreme to which they go. Reporter Becky Griffin, fewer mass shootings if more babies were aborted. I'm not joking. Reporter model Becky Griffin took to Twitter on Thursday and responded to Wednesday's mass shooting at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, by insinuating that alleged shooter Nicholas Cruz wouldn't have carried out mass murder if his mother and his had aborted him instead of putting him up for adoption. So she's wants to prevent 17 students being killed in Parkland, Florida, by increasing the murder of children in the fetus, in the womb, when they're still fetuses. Quote, woman puts baby up for adoption. He grows up to be a violent young man who will spend the rest of his life in prison for a mass murder. Tell me more and about how abortions are wrong, unquote, Griffin wrote in a tweet that went viral on Thursday, adding the hashtags, a hashtag Florida and a hashtag Parkland school shooting. The former MTV personality's tweet was in reference to an Associated Press report that Nicholas and his brother had been living with a family friend after the death of his adoptive parents. Griffin later tweeted, "This drew so much attention by people jumping to conclusions like, I think adoption is wrong, when all I said was that a woman who was clearly unfit to have a child did not raise him, and maybe it could have turned out better if she could have made a choice." Well, obviously, she did make a choice. I mean, you know, the pro-choice people, the only justifiable choice for them is abortion. She says here, if she could have made a choice. The mother obviously did make a choice because abortion was legal at the time that this kid was born, that this Nicholas Cruz was born, and the mother did make a choice. Chose to have the baby. And basically calling for abortion, of course, is a form of pre-crime. You know, you do some sort of, what are you going to do? What does she advocate? That we do some sort of DNA test or genetic test and say, oh, this kid is going to grow up to be a mass murderer, so let's kill him now? That kind of pre-crime? Is that what you're talking about? Griffin was ripped on social media by pro-life activists and pro-choice Twitter users and responded to her detractors by sharing a link to a refuted study of how abortions reduce crime. Cruz, 17, a former student at Marjorie. Okay. All right, so just the last paragraph is just repeating information that we already know. Okay, so this kind of a craziness is going around, and it goes around after each of these shootings, but we have to look at this dispassionately and see how we can better protect our children, and ask, when are we going to start protecting our children on campus? Why do we put them in areas where they are completely vulnerable? Do we send our soldiers to war without guns? No. We don't put our soldiers in harm's way like that. And why are we just putting our children in harm's way? By not giving them the protection that we would give them in our own homes. Anyway, it's another argument for homeschooling, folks. You know, keep your kids at home where you can protect them with your guns. All right, elsewhere. So anyway, let's just go through the headlines on the Cruz shooting and then go on to something else. FBI botched Cruz case. Actually, Florida Governor Scott is now calling for the resignation of the head of FBI to take responsibility for the botching of this case. Deputies were called to killer's home 39 times over 7 years, they say, and the meds, we've already talked about that. Demon Voices was investigated after cutting himself with Snapchat. School building to be destroyed. Threats, hoaxes, anxiety, arrests, uneasiness grips students. Sales of bulletproof backpacks soar. That might make, at least, you know, if you're not going to protect your kids with guns, then by giving the teachers guns, then at least give them a bulletproof backpack. That might make it's better than nothing, I suppose. Not much better, but a little bit better than nothing. All right, let's go to Robert Mueller's investigation and see how much collusion he has come up with. Well, the answer is 0. Mueller indicts Russians. So he has indicted Russians. Trolls of 2016, leak, probe not over. We'll go through that in just a minute here after we look through the other headlines. A powerful quake shakes Mexico City, developing 7.2 magnitude. Don't see any immediate reports of serious damage there. If anyone knows of any, please let me know. White House rejects a giant amnesty. Supreme Court weighs intervening on Dreamers. ICE arrests 212 illegals, targets 122 businesses in L.A. sweep. Activists block Homeland Security van from accessing detention center. Illegal force-fed goat, cocaine, and whiskey. Independents may soon outnumber Republicans in California. Marilyn Manson cuts concert short after meltdown on stage. Claim ESPN.com altered headline, buried stories to please advertisers. Well, that happens. Yeah, that happens. You know, money talks. You know, the basic function of media, whether it's television or newspapers or online like ESPN.com, is to connect advertisers with consumers. That's the function. I mean, you know, reporters have idealistic views. You know, we're here to report the news and everything. And there is, you know, that aspect to it. But basically, the function is to connect advertisers and consumers. I mean, that's how everybody makes their money. So yeah, sometimes it happens that stories are sort of you know, even in newspapers are put in the back page instead of the front page because of an advertiser, or because, you know, or even some stories are ignored. Lost Mexican City had as many buildings as Manhattan. Laser scan shows. That's interesting. Trump cleared. Indictment says Russians worked with unwitting participants, talking about the Mueller investigation. President calls for unity to protect democracy. California man in investigation pleads guilty about the Mueller investigation. Communist secret agent claim rocks UK politics. Soros calls for social media regulations to fight populism. There you go. He's exposing himself again as being, you know, an elitist, and he wants to he has this, I guess he's part of this elitist cabal that wants to rule the world. He's making that more and more obvious, isn't it? Olympics crashing for NBC, looking to be lowest rated ever. Well, that's good because it's, like I said, turned into, I think it's going to be right there alongside the 1936 Berlin Olympics in terms of the political propaganda that's been going on. Tough day for top Americans. First athletes contract norovirus, and record Minnesotans own guns. Crime rate, 50-year low. Wow. How did that happen? Justice Thomas decries victimhood culture in rare public remarks. Black Panther roars at box office. People were testifying about God's miracles on the set. Hundreds deck out in African attire. Talking about the Black Panther movie. Apple employees keep smacking into their new headquarters glass walls. Spiral. Brazilian military takes control of violent Rio. Flight diverted after passenger refuses to stop farting. All right, maybe, I've been on long flights, all right, 14 hours, quite a few of those. Let's move on. Cow lives alone on aisle after miraculous slaughter escape. Smashes fence, breaks rancher arm, and swims to safety. Good for him, I guess. I don't know. Well, 80-year-old man convicted of child sex abuse could get life in prison. How many years was he doing that child sex abuse? Flu season shows signs of leveling off. Mother jailed for baptizing daughter. We'll definitely have to look at that. Stocks post best week since 2013. Bulls are back? ? Goldman Sachs CEO gives Trump credit for economy. Says better than if Hillary won. FEC war on Drudge goes underground. Thermal imaging drone tracks down fleeing suspect. ISIS flag raised at Utah High School. Yes, they took down the U.S. flag and destroyed it and then put up an ISIS flag in its place. It's at a high school. Kids are dumb. I think that's basically the headline there. Kids are dumb. Man who accused ex-Seattle mayor of sexual abuse found dead in motel. Light penalties await most caught texting while driving. Brain-to-brain communication to replace human speech. Interesting. Would that overcome the language barrier? I don't know. Do we use language when we are thinking? Like, I'm hungry. Or like I was discussing with someone, actually, Pastor Jagger's wife was mentioning to me that they did a lot of work in Hispanic countries, and she said that the first phrase she learned when she started working was "Where's the bathroom? Where's the toilet?" And that was actually the first phrase that I learned when I got to Korea, because that is probably the most important phrase. They don't necessarily teach that in textbooks, but that is the most important phrase. Where's the toilet? So would I be able to communicate that without using language, spoken language? I don't know. Do we use language when we think? I have no idea. All right, let's look at this Mueller investigation, how he's now dragnetting the Russians. This is on special CNBC. Special Counsel Mueller. Is it Mueller or Mueller? Some people pronounce it Mueller. Are you telling me to quit? No. Okay, all right. Suddenly the music started playing. That usually means time for a break, but I don't feel like breaking. All right, I'm going to keep going here. Special Counsel Mueller: Russians conducted information warfare against the U.S. during election to help Donald Trump win. Special Counsel Robert Mueller said a grand jury had indicted 13 Russian nationals and 3 Russian entities for alleged interference in the 2016 presidential election. The defendants allegedly conducted information warfare against the United States election process to help Donald Trump win. the defendants used fake American personas, social media platforms, and other internet media to advance their scheme, according to an indictment. Okay. Let's see what else it says. A federal grand jury has, during which they strongly supported the candidacy of Donald Trump, Special Counsel Robert Mueller's office said Friday. The indictment says that a Russian organization called the Internet Research Agency sought to wage information warfare against the United States and to sow discord in the American political system by using fictitious American personas and social media platforms and other Internet-based media. Internet Research Agencies, a so-called, here it goes, a so-called troll farm, based in St. Petersburg, Russia, was allegedly controlled by a defendant in the indictment named Yevgeny Prigozhin, who is a wealthy associate of Russian President Vladimir Putin. The indictment said the Internet Research Agency was registered with the Russian government as a corporate entity in 2013, and by May 2014, the group's strategy included interfering with the 2016 U.S. presidential election with the stated goal of, quote, spreading distrust towards the candidates and the political system in general, unquote, the indictment said. The indictment details an extremely sophisticated conspiracy in which defendants traveled to the United States to conduct research, employed specialists to fine-tune social media posts to ensure they appeared authentic, and stole real people's identities to purchase online ads. By early to mid-2016, the defendants were, quote, supporting the presidential campaign of then-candidate Donald J. Trump and disparaging Hillary Clinton, unquote, the 8-count indictment charges. The defendants also engaged in operations to quote, denigrate, unquote, Republican primary opponents of Trump, such as Senator Ted Cruz of Texas and Florida's Marco Rubio, the indictment said. Some defendants posing as U.S. persons, I think they mean, and without revealing their Russian association, communicated with unwitting individuals associated with the Trump campaign and with other political activists to seek to coordinate political activities, the indictment claims. So they put in the word unwitting. Unwitting means no collusion. Unwitting. So the people that were working with the Americans that were working with these Russians were doing it unwittingly, without knowledge of that this is what they were doing. Foreigners are barred from spending money to try to influence the outcome of a federal election. As part of their efforts, the defendants also allegedly encouraged minority groups to either not to vote for in the election or to vote for a third-party candidate. Both actions would have hurt Clinton, who received significant support from minority voters. And after the election of Trump as president in November 2016, the defendants used fake personas to organize and coordinate political rallies in support of Trump, while also doing the same to create rallies protesting the results of the election, the indictment said. On November 12, 2016, the defendants organized a rally in New York to show their support for President-elect Donald Trump, while at the same time organizing a Trump is not my president rally that also was held in New York. So they played both sides, didn't they? Organized a show your support for President-elect Donald Trump rally, while at the same time organizing a Trump is not my president rally. Well, that's interesting. So Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein said the defendants created hundreds of accounts using fake personas on the social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to advance their scheme. One example of that was the Twitter account Tennessee GOP, which used the handle @Tennessee GOP and which falsely claimed to be controlled by a U.S. state political party, unquote, the indictment said. Over time, the 10 GOP, that's Tennessee GOP account attracted more than 100,000 online followers. The defendants also allegedly used a computer infrastructure based partly in the United States to hide the Russian origin of their activities and to avoid detection by U.S. authorities, the indictment said. Rosenstein said there is no allegation in the indictment that any American was a knowing participant in the scheme, nor is there any allegation that the scheme affected the outcome of the election. So there is no allegation that the scheme affected the outcome of the election. no allegation that the scheme affected the outcome of the election. All of the defendants are charged with conspiracy to defraud the United States. 3 defendants are charged with conspiracy to commit wire fraud and bank fraud, and 5 defendants are charged with aggravated identity theft. None of the defendants is in custody. Yeah, because they're all in Russia, I guess. The indictment came 4 days after an American named Richard Pinedo pleaded guilty to using identity stolen from U.S. citizens to bypass the security systems of online payments companies. Pinedo also bought and sold bank account numbers over the internet using stolen identities. The charging documents against Pinedo do not mention a connection with the Russian indictment, but were released by Mueller's office shortly after that indictment was disclosed. Mueller's office was created specifically to investigate Russian meddling in the... No. Let's not move the goalpost now. That office was created to investigate Russian collusion between Russia and President Trump. Let's not move. Let's not start. No, hey, no. Don't back down just because it's not going well for you guys. A section of the indictment against the Russians appears to refer to conduct by Pinedo. On Friday afternoon, after being briefed about the indictment by Rosenstein, and after the release of the document, President Trump tweeted about the case. And here's what President Trump said. Russia started their anti-U.S. campaign in 2014, long before I announced that I would run for president. The results of the election were not impacted. The Trump campaign did nothing wrong. No collusion. Yes, that's what President Trump said yesterday at 3:18 p.m. No collusion. White House spokesman Sarah Sanders soon after released a prepared statement from Trump in which he said it is more important than ever before to come together as Americans. We cannot allow those seeking to sow confusion, discord, and rancor to be successful. It's time we stop the outlandish partisan attacks, wild and false allegations, and far-fetched theories which only serve to further the agendas of bad actors like Russia and do nothing to protect the principles of our institutions, Trump said. We must unite as Americans to protect the integrity of our democracy and our elections. While Trump and the White House on Friday were quick to claim that the indictment found no collusion by Trump's campaign with Russia, Bloomberg News reported that Mueller and his prosecutors have not concluded their investigation on that question. Bloomberg cited an unidentified person with knowledge of Mueller's probe. A spokesman for Clinton said she had no comment on the indictment. The indictment said that the Internet Research Agency was registered with the Russian government as a corporate entity in 2013. By in or around May 2014, the organization's strategy included interfering with the 2016 U.S. presidential election with the stated goal of spreading distrust toward the candidates and the political system in general, the indictment said. House Speaker Paul Ryan, Republican of Wisconsin, said, "We have known that Russia meddled in the elections, but these indictments detail the extent of the subterfuge. The Russians engaged in a sinister and systematic attack on our political system. It was a conspiracy to subvert the process and take aim at democracy itself," Ryan said. Today's announcement underscores why we need to follow the facts and work to protect the integrity of our future elections. So what we have here is the indictment says that and this has not been proven in court. It's just an indictment, all right? So it has not been proven as fact in court. But what the indictment says is that a friend of Putin ran this troll farm in St. Petersburg that was based in St. Petersburg, and it started out sort of as a general thing against a lot of candidates and against the political system itself, but it wound up being very much against Hillary and for Trump. So why would they do that? Well, the king has said, if the king was saying at the time that if Hillary is elected, we're going to have war with Russia. And that was and I think the Russians also agreed with that, because there was a strong indication that Hillary was going to go after Russia in some kind of a war in the triggered by incidents in what was going on in Eastern Europe. And if Russia agreed with that, if Putin agreed with that, then in order to avoid such a war, it would make sense that they would plan this kind of a intelligence, black operation type thing to make sure that the candidate that would likely cause such a war would be defeated. Now, the indictment says that there's no evidence that what they did actually impacted the election, and I would probably suspect that that's correct. So even Mueller's grand jury could not undermine the legitimacy of the Trump presidency. If they had said, "Oh yeah, the Russians elected Trump," then that would have undermined President Trump. But that's not what they're saying. They're saying that all that the Russians did, it cannot really. There's no way to prove that it or that it actually impacted the results of the election. It doesn't appear to have impacted that result. So anyway, that is the big thing on Russia this morning. Mueller's indictment against 13 Russians and 3 Russian entities. So I guess they better not be coming to the United States anytime soon. They'll get arrested and put in jail for that, and of course they will be tried, and we would be able to find out the actual truth or falsehood of those indictments. But for not right now, that's probably not going to happen. It's probably going to stop there for those, and we'll see whether Mueller can come up with further indictments. But it looks like he's having a hard time finding collusion, a very, very hard time. Now let's look at this situation in Charlotte, where a mother gets 7 days in jail for baptizing her daughter. What is going on here? Charlotte, North Carolina. A Charlotte mother has been sentenced to 7 days in jail for having her daughter baptized, according to the WSOC. That's the television station there. The court case goes back a couple of years to when Kendra Stocks and Paul Schaaf were in a custody battle over their daughter. Divorce. Court documents say the two could never agree on religion. According to court records, Schaaf is a practicing Catholic who attends Mass every week. Schaaf being which side now? Schaaf is the father, okay. Schaaf is the father. He attends Mass every week, and ultimately the court granted him final decision-making authority on all legal custody decisions, including decisions concerning religion. Both parents were warned that they could go to jail if they ignored the warning. But the next day, Stocks being the mother, allegedly went out and baptized her daughter, which Schaaf found out about on Facebook. The court document said that the mother has acted selfishly by depriving the father of his ability to be present at an event that was extraordinarily important to him. The judge found Stocks in contempt of court and sentenced her to 7 days in jail. In contempt cases, a judge can order someone detained if they believe someone is improperly challenging or ignoring the court's authority. Violators can be fined, jail, or both. That's why, hey, another argument against divorce. That's okay. Goldman Sachs gives Trump credit for economy, says better than if Hillary had won. Goldman Sachs. This is a Yahoo article, finance.yahoo.com. Goldman Sachs CEO is saying this. The U.S. economy is better off under President Donald Trump than it would have been under Hillary Clinton, according to Lloyd Blankfein, the CEO of Goldman Sachs. If the president didn't win and Hillary won, I bet you the economy is higher today than it otherwise would be. If the president didn't win and Hillary won, ... I bet you the economy is higher today than it otherwise would be, Blankfein said in an interview with CNN's Christine Romans. Blankfein had backed Clinton's bid for the White House. Okay. 2 days before Trump's inauguration, he linked Wall Street's newfound confidence to Trump, but fell short of giving him full credit. I think one of the reasons why the election had such a dramatic effect is because it was drawing people in the direction that it was already heading, Blankfein told CNBC from the 2017 World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. Economic growth has remained strong since Trump took office in 2016 and hit his 3% target of 2 quarters last year. Business leaders' confidence has been bolstered by corporate tax cuts and pledges by the Trump administration to roll back regulations. And now there's concern about higher inflation, partly because of the new administration's fiscal stimulus. Blankfein added that he was talking about the economy, not other things. He's taken to Twitter to criticize Trump about some of those other things, including the president's reported description of Haiti and African countries, despite all the SHIT, American values will shine through, he tweeted last month. So anyway, Goldman Sachs CEO thinks good things are happening with the economy because of President Trump. His confidence has grown over the past year. All right, let's take our 7 o'clock break now, and we'll come back after this 5-minute break with more news from a Choni Group perspective.
We kind of like lost the sense of like why we were doing this, like why we were going through this, and kind of felt rushed because we only knew each other for about 2 months actually.
Only 1 month.
1 month?
Yeah.
Okay, 1 month before the matching ceremony we had. And so yeah, we started having a hard time. And so like for me, like, you know, you get kind of fooled by Hollywood, and I think that's where my biggest trouble was, because I didn't know how to be an actual good husband at that time and how to like really work with a woman before. So Hyun really gave me clear direction. Basically, you know, he just said like, you know, you have to be strong, you have to be, you know, confident in yourself and not be so worried about yourself. You have to be confident in who you are, kind of thing.
The more I had to wait, the more attacking was getting much more intense, and I was really struggling at the time. So, you know, and you know, I could feel Satan was just trying to attack me, playing with my emotions, making me really complicated and confused. And it got to the point where it turned me very negative about the blessing. So, and that time I knew the way to overcome this situation was, you know, just holding on to God and His words, because I don't think I'll be ever to overcome this situation alone. You know, that time I really felt I really need God by my side. So I started doing conditions, prayer and Rima. And doing that, through that, I really realized, you know, God was really straightforward to me and just, you know, sending these messages to me, you know, telling me to be thankful. I realized, you know, God really wanted this blessing to happen.
Welcome back to the King's Report for Saturday, February 17th, 2018. Tim Elder in for the second king of Cheonguk, Hyung Jin-moon. And we're covering some disturbing and explosive news about the Korean Peninsula this morning. We started out this morning at the 5 o'clock hour with a InfoWars video where Alex Jones is reporting that he has sources in the U.S. intelligence community saying that North Korea is telling their own military people that there will be an attack on Japan late March, early April. Alex Jones wasn't too clear on the exact dates. In one place he says the last 2 days of March, but in another place in the video he says the period of a possible attack begins on March 28th, which would then make it the last 4 days of March. So I'm not really sure if he's clear on the exact dates, but that. And then I see here on the worldtribune.com that there's a possibly related article where the headline is, Get Real, U.S. Commander in Korea says Kim in hot pursuit of unified communist nation. Kim Jong-un has put on a charm offensive at the Winter Games while extracting money from South Korea under the guise of reunification, the leader of U.S. Pacific Command said. But the North Korean leader's goal goes beyond preventing regime change, he said. Rather, he is focused on the ultimate goal of a single communist system on the Korean Peninsula. I think that's very true. Admiral Harry Harris told the House Armed Services Committee on February 14th that he does not agree with the prevailing view that Kim is building a nuclear arsenal to safeguard his regime only. The North Korean leader seeks reunification under a single communist system. That is the long view, Harris said. Kim Jong-un's nuclear ambitions contribute to that view and help him blackmail countries such as South Korea and the U.S., Harris said. Sending his younger sister, Kim Yo-jong, to the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics is clearly a charm offensive by Kim Jong-un, Harris said. I think it behooves us and our Korean allies not to be charmed and consider North Korea for the regime it is and to deal with it on the basis of fact and not charm, Harris said, adding he believes General Vincent Brooks, commander of U.S. Forces Korea, is ideally positioned to do that and that he views his charm offensive through clear eyes. Harris said the Trump administration should maintain its campaign of maximum pressure, including additional economic and diplomatic sanctions, to persuade Kim to abandon his nuclear weapons and ballistic missile programs. Meanwhile, the U.S. should bolster its missile defense systems, Harris said. Given where we think the North Korean capability might be in terms of their missiles in 3 or 4 years or in the early 2020s, I think we must continue to improve our missile defenses, Harris told the committee. Harris said that could be accomplished with the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System in Guam, that's the THAAD system in Guam, and the possible placement of a defense radar system and ground-based interceptors in Hawaii. While some might dispute both the reliability and quality of the North's strategic weapons, it is indisputable that Kim is rapidly closing the gap between rhetoric and capability, Harris said. While South Korea and Japan have lived with the North Korean threat for years, now the shadow looms over the American homeland. Meanwhile, a North Korean defector said Kim Jong-un is undertaking a charm offensive in the South because he fears the United States will launch a preventive strike on the North. Kim Jong-un is afraid that the U.S. will launch a preventive strike, and he is trying to buy time to complete his nuclear and missile programs, Lee Jong-ho, who defected from the North in 2014 and currently resides in the U.S., said at a February 14th forum at the Wilson Center in Washington, D.C. Lee, a former ruling party official who worked for 3 decades in Office 39 of the North's ruling Workers' Party, said Kim Jong-un is struggling under the strongest yet sanctions and military diplomatic pressure, so he is trying to improve the situation by putting on a false front. Well, the anti-missile capabilities should also protect our allies, including especially Japan. Already, THAAD systems have been deployed in South Korea, despite the original objections by the current president. And the current president of South Korea has made a promise to China that no additional THAAD systems will be deployed in South Korea. And Moon Jae-in, the current president of South Korea, has also promised the Chinese that South Korea will not become a part of any kind of a tripartite defense arrangement between the United States, South Korea, and Japan. And he has also promised that any cooperation between Korea and Japan will not develop into any kind of a military agreement, military sort of mutual defense type of situation. So Moon Jae-in made these promises to China just days before President Trump visited South Korea, and it was a way of China to exercise its right, self-declared right, self-proclaimed right, to be the sort of the master overlord of the East Asian region. Let's see what else we find here on Drudge. Let's see this earthquake shaking Mexico City. I hope there's no damage from that. Let's see what is happening there. This is in south and central Mexico. A powerful magnitude 7.2 earthquake shook south and central Mexico Friday, causing people to flee, swaying buildings and office towers in the country's capital, where residents were still jittery after a deadly quake 5 months ago. Crowds gathered in Mexico City's central Reforma Avenue, as well as on streets in Oaxaca's state capital, near the quake's epicenter, which was in a rural area close to Mexico's Pacific coast and the border with Guerrero State. There were no immediate reports of deaths. It was awful, said Mercedes Rojas Huerta, 57, who was sitting on a bench outside her home in Mexico City's trendy Condesa district, too frightened to go back inside. It started to shake. The cars were going here and there. What do I do? She said she was still scared, thinking of the September 19th earthquake that caused 228 deaths in the capital and 141 more in nearby states. Many buildings in Mexico City are still damaged from that quake. The U.S. Geological Survey originally put the magnitude of Friday's quake at 7.5, but later lowered it to 7.2. It said the epicenter was 33 miles northeast of Pinotepa in southern Oaxaca state. It had a depth of 15 miles. Mexican Civil Protection Chief Luis Felipe Puente tweeted that there were no immediate reports of damages from the quake. The Oaxaca state government said via Twitter that only material damages were reported near Pinotepa and Santiago Jamiltepec, but that shelters were open for those fleeing damaged homes. The Mexico City Red Cross said via Twitter that the facade of a building collapsed in Mexico City's Condesa neighborhood, which was hit hard on September 19th. A video showed people walking through a dust cloud, but reporters at the scene found no evidence of a collapse at the location given. About an hour after the quake, a magnitude 5.8 aftershock, also centered on Oaxaca, caused tall buildings in Mexico City to briefly sway again. The USGS seismologist Paul Earle said Friday's earthquake appeared to be a separate trembler rather than an aftershock of a September 7th earthquake also centered in Oaxaca, which registered a magnitude of 8.2. The September 19 earthquake struck closer to Mexico City. The September 7 quake killed nearly 100 people in Oaxaca and neighboring Chiapas, but was centered about 273 miles southwest of Friday's earthquake, Earle said. In Mexico's capital, frightened residents flooded into the streets in Condesa, including one identified woman wrapped in just a towel, but there were no immediate signs of damage. I'm scared, said Rojas Huerta, recalling 5 months ago when buildings fell as she ran barefoot into the street. The house is old. Okay, so it seems that there's no significant damage there, and no reports yet, at least yet, of damage to human life. And that's fortunate that is what's happening there. On the amnesty situation, or I should say the DACA situation, the Senate rejected both plans, both the plan that was supported by President Trump and another plan that was supported by a bipartisan group of senators. But both of those went down, and so now I have to see what happens during the coming. There's a self-imposed deadline of March 5th, I think it is, where the DACA is going to be formally canceled. But of course, there's a court case pending where a district court judge has said that the whole that thing about Trump ending the DACA program is unconstitutional or illegal or something, that they can't do that, which is very strange because this was put into place by Obama's executive action, and now President Trump is being told by this district court that he cannot cancel it by executive action. Well, U.S. top court, and now the Supreme Court is going to rule on that, or thinking of ruling on that. It mulls on whether to take that up, it says here. This is Reuters article. The U.S. Supreme Court on Friday discussed in private how to handle President Donald Trump's appeal of a judge's decision blocking his plan to end protections for young illegal immigrants dubbed Dreamers, and the 9 justices could announce as early as Tuesday whether they will take up the case. Trump administration is appealing San Francisco-based, where else, U.S. District Judge William Alsup's January 9 ruling that halted the president's order to end the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, which protects from deportation young adults who came into the country illegally as children and gives them work permits. U.S. lawmakers have been working to resolve the fate of the hundreds of thousands of young adults, mostly Hispanics, protected by the program, but legislation that would have done so failed in the Senate on Thursday. DACA was implemented in 2012 by Democratic former President Barack Obama. That's right, he did it all by himself, not the Congress, all by himself he did it. If the justices agree to hear the appeal by the Republican president, they likely would not rule on the case until late June. If they turn away the appeal, Alsup's nationwide injunction blocking Trump's plan to rescind DACA would remain in effect while legal challenges to the president's action proceed. Alsup's injunction was issued in a lawsuit led by California's Democratic Attorney General. We had an article a few days ago about how Democratic attorneys general in various states are communicating with each other and colluding with each other. There's collusion there with each other on how to oppose or nullify policy actions by the president. Under Trump's order, DACA would begin phasing out on March 5th. If Alsup's decision remains in place, DACA beneficiaries would be able to reapply for protections past that deadline, although the administration is not processing new applications. On Tuesday, a second U.S. judge issued a similar injunction ordering the Trump administration to keep DACA in place. Protecting the Dreamers is of paramount importance to Democrats and some Republicans. Trump himself has backed legislation that would give them a path to citizenship, but also would curtail legal immigration. That's right, Democrats and some Republicans that are referred to here are putting protection for these illegal immigrants above protection for American citizens. That's what it means by being paramount, all right? So paramount means that it is most important. It's more important than protecting American citizens to them. In a Twitter post on Friday, Trump sought to blame Democrats for the problems created by his order, writing, "Cannot believe how badly DACA recipients have been treated by the Democrats. Totally abandoned. Republicans are still working hard." Under DACA, that was the president's tweet, under DACA, about 700,000 young adults receive protections for 2-year periods, after which they must reapply. An estimated 1.8 million people are eligible for the program. Trump's move to rescind DACA prompted legal challenges by Democratic state attorneys general and various organizations and individuals in multiple federal courts, his administration argued that Obama exceeded his powers under the Constitution when he bypassed Congress and created DACA. So we'll see what the Supreme Court does. It could announce its decision as early as Friday on whether to take up the president's appeal of the decision by the district court in San Francisco. Let's see, what else do we have here? ICE arrests 212 illegals, targets 122 businesses in LA sweep. San Francisco, of course, California as a whole has declared itself to be a sanctuary city, and perhaps for that reason, specifically because California made that declaration, ICE seems to be targeting illegals in California. So on the one hand, it's sort of a concentration of targets for ICE, isn't it, for the immigration authorities? Lost Mexican City has had as many buildings as Manhattan, laser scan shows. Well, you could have as many buildings, but maybe not as high. But that's lost civilizations are always very interesting. Archaeology might evoke thoughts of intrepid explorers and painstaking digging, but in fact, researchers say it is a high-tech laser mapping technique that is rewriting the textbooks at an unprecedented rate. So this is the thing, science is always developing. But at any given time, we are led to believe that the level that science has reached at that particular point is the truth, I mean, come on. Even the understanding of the atom has changed so much over the years. When I was taking physics, I guess, a test in high school, we were taught that electrons revolve around the nucleus in specific orbits, like the moon revolves around the Earth. But later on, this whole idea of electron cloud came about. We didn't know about that at that time. We weren't taught that. And if we put that on a test, we would have given a 0, an F. Because the truth at that time was that with these, you could draw lines on a sheet of paper of electrons going around this around the nucleus. Science is always changing, it's always developing. Always, their textbooks are always being rewritten. The science textbooks today will be rewritten over the next 10, 20 years. And yet at any given time, we are told by scientists that we have the truth. This is the truth. And if you say anything different, you're a conspiracy theorist or an anti-scientist. But that's simply not true. And here, archaeology textbooks are being rewritten. The approach known as the light detection and ranging scanning LiDAR involves directing a rapid succession of laser pulses at the ground from an aircraft. The time and wavelength of the pulses reflected by the surface are combined with GPS and other data to produce a precise three-dimensional map of the landscape. Crucially, the technique probes beneath foliage, useful for areas where vegetation is dense. Earlier this month, researchers revealed it had been used to discover an ancient Mayan city within the dense jungles of Guatemala, while it has also helped archaeologists to map the city of Caracal, another Mayan metropolis. Now, researchers have used the technique to reveal the full extent of an ancient city in western Mexico, about half an hour's drive from Morelia, built by rivals to the Aztecs. To think that this massive city existed in the heartland of Mexico for all this time, and nobody knew it was there, is kind of amazing, said Chris Fisher, an archaeologist at Colorado State University, who is presenting the latest findings from the study at the conference of the American Association for the Advancement of Science in Austin, Texas this week. While less well known than the Aztecs, the Purepeca were a major civilization in central Mexico in the early 16th century, before Europeans arrived and wreaked havoc through war and disease. Purepeca cities included in an imperial capital called, a difficult name to pronounce, that lies on the edge of the lake in western Mexico, an area in which modern Purapeka communities still live. Under using LiDAR, researchers have found that the recently discovered city known as Angamuco was more than double the size of that previously difficult to pronounce name city, although probably not as densely populated, extending over 26 square kilometers of ground that was covered by a lava flow thousands of years ago. This is a huge area with a lot of people and a lot of architectural foundations that are represented, said Fisher. If you do the math, all of a sudden you are talking about 40,000 building foundations up there, which is about the same number of building foundations that are on the island of Manhattan. The team also found that Angamuco has an unusual layout. Monuments such as pyramids and open plazas are largely concentrated in 8 zones around the city's edges, rather than being located in one large city center. According to Fisher, more than 100,000 people are thought to have lived in Angamuco in its heyday between about 1000 AD to 1350 AD. Its size would make it the biggest city that we know of right now in western Mexico during this period, said Fisher. First found by researchers in 2007, archaeologists initially attempted to explore Angamuco using traditional boots and on-the-ground approach, resulting in the discovery of about 1,500 architectural features over each square kilometer surveyed. But the team soon realized that the rugged terrain meant it would take at least a decade to map the whole area. Instead, since 2011, the LiDAR technique has been used to map a 35 square kilometer area, revealing an astonishing array of features at high resolution, from pyramids and temples to road systems, garden areas for growing food, and even ball courts. How do they know there were ball courts? I don't know. Were they playing ball? Yeah. So far, more than 7,000 architectural features over a 4 square kilometer area seen using LiDAR have been verified by the team on the ground, with excavations undertaken at 7 locations to shed further light on the site. The earliest evidence from the city, including ceramic fragments and radiocarbon dating of remnants from offerings, dates to about 900 AD, with the city believed to have undergone 2 waves of development and one of collapse before the arrival of the Spanish. Fisher adds that LiDAR is likely to lead to further developments. Everywhere you point the LiDAR instrument, you find new stuff, and that is because we know so little about the archaeological universe in the Americas right now, he said. Right now, every textbook has to be rewritten, and 2 years from now, they're going to have to be rewritten again. Fisher has also used LiDAR to explore a remote area of the Mesquite region of northeastern Honduras, shedding light on what is now known as the City of the Jaguar. This settlement, the team found, has terraces, water-controlled features such as canals, and boasted about 10 plaza complexes, with the whole city stretching over 3 square kilometers. Many of these areas of the Americas that we see today, that we think we would classify as pristine tropical forests, are really abandoned gardens, says Fisher. However, previous coverage of the work has proved controversial, with some saying the claims of a lost city smack of colonialist rhetoric. Elizabeth Graham, professor of Mesoamerican archaeology at University College London, who was not involved in the project, said the team's work was impressive and that LiDAR was backing up long-held suspicions about the size of archaeological settlements. Once it shows all traces of the land surface, we can interpret those because you can tell what is natural and what is not, she added. It'll show you the terracing where houses are, or at least structures of some sort, agricultural features, manipulated land, all of that. But, she said, while LiDAR can help to direct expeditions and digs, traditional techniques were still needed to unearth the details. Ultimately, we still have to get on the ground and then excavate, she said. All right. So the archaeologists, archaeology is a good area to get into. It's very interesting, to study how civilizations grew, but also how they collapsed. In many cases, they collapsed as a result of socialism. It grew to a certain point, but then they get to the point where people say, "Hey, we can get free stuff. Let's stop working and just let the government provide for us." Which sounds good, except until you realize that the government itself doesn't have any money. It has to take the money from somebody else. And as Margaret Thatcher famously said, eventually, the problem with socialism is that eventually it runs out of other people's money. And so then the civilization collapses. And that is what is happening in Europe now, certainly. They're socialism and now bringing in these migrants from North Africa and the Middle East. And clearly Europe is collapsing, despite, all of Soros's men can't put Humpty Dumpty back together again. I'm sorry. Soros I think is going to find that out. He's trying to stop it. He's trying to stop it. He's trying to stop a Brexit. He's trying to now he wants to control the media. Let's get into that. Where was that thing where Soros says that you have to control the media in order to prevent populism? Here we go. Soros calls for social media regulation to fight populism. Yes. So what he means is you have to regulate the media to enable the elite to carry out their program, to carry out their agenda. Populism, all the rabble-rousers, the peasants with pitchforks. Billionaire open borders activist George Soros has demanded the European Union regulate social media because voters' minds are being controlled and manipulated. Whoa, I'm the one who's supposed to control and manipulate voters' minds, not anybody else. I'm the only one who's allowed to do that. Excuse me here. Got excited there with Soros. He claimed the size of social media firms made them a public menace. And they had led people to vote against globalist causes, including electing President Donald J. Trump, in an article for The Guardian published Thursday. And Breitbart here is linking to the article. Let's go to the article. Let's see if we can go to the article. Let's see if Guardian will let us do that. Yes, here we go. This is an article by George Soros. Here we go. The man speaking for himself. The man speaking for himself. And the headline is, the title of the article is, Only the EU Can Break Facebook and Google's Dominance. Yes, let's let the man speak for himself. Here we go. These are all words of George Soros, all right, published in The Guardian. Here we go. The current moment in world history is a painful one. Oh, you can feel his pain, can't you? Can you feel his pain, the billionaire? Open societies are in crisis, and forms of dictatorships and mafia states exemplified by Vladimir Putin's Russia are on the rise. In the United States, President Donald Trump would like to establish his own mafia-style state, but cannot because the Constitution, other institutions, and a vibrant civil society won't allow it. Whoa! George, this is what you're trying to do. Yeah? Not only is the survival of open society in question, the survival of our entire civilization is at stake. Don't worry, archaeologists will uncover it 10,000 years later. But come on. The survival of our entire civilization is at stake. And you can see now that the elite is growing desperate, aren't they? They're growing desperate because the people are speaking out. The people are rising up, yes, with our pitchforks and our rods of iron, with our AR-15s. And the elite is actually scared. The rise of leaders such as Kim Jong-un in North Korea. No, Kim Jong-un didn't rise recently, I mean, Kim Jong-un was just Kim Il. If you're going to talk about a rise, you need to talk about Kim Il-sung 70 years ago. But you're late. And Trump in the U.S., see? Trying to connect Trump and Kim Jong-un. Have much to do with this. The rise of leaders such as Kim Jong-un and Trump have much to do with this. Much to do with what? Not clear what this refers to. Both seem willing to risk a nuclear war in order to keep themselves in power. Oh, George. President Trump is doing his duty as president to protect the United States, not to keep himself in power. But the root cause goes even deeper. Mankind's ability to harness the forces of nature, both for constructive and destructive purposes, continues to grow, while our ability to govern ourselves properly fluctuates and is now at a low ebb. Yes, that's right. We need the elite to govern us because we are not capable of governing ourselves. We need the aristocracy, the 21st century aristocracy to come in and govern us. We need George Soros as our messiah. This is what he's saying. The rise and monopolistic behavior of the giant American internet platform companies is contributing mightily to the U.S. government's impotence. These companies have often played an innovative and liberating role, but as Facebook and Google have grown ever more powerful, they have become obstacles to innovation and have caused a variety of problems of which we are now only beginning to become aware. Companies earn their profits by exploiting their environment. Mining and oil companies exploit the physical environment. Social media companies exploit the social environment. This is particularly nefarious because the companies influence how people think and behave without them even being aware of it. This interferes with the functioning of democracy and the integrity of elections. Wait a second, I thought it was the Russians who did this. Now it's Facebook and Google. Come on, stop moving the goalposts. Because internet platform companies are networks, they enjoy rising marginal returns, which accounts for their phenomenal growth. The network effect is truly unprecedented and transformative, but it is also unsustainable. It took Facebook 8.5 years to reach 1 billion users, and half that time to reach the second billion. At this rate, Facebook will run out of people to convert in less than 3 years. Facebook and Google effectively control over half of all digital advertising revenue. To maintain their dominance, they need to expand their networks and increase their share of users' attention. Currently, they do this by providing users with a convenient platform. The more time users spend on the platform, the more valuable they become to the companies. So here again, we have, this is what communists do, and this is what Soros is doing as well. They point out a problem, and there are always plenty of problems to point out. And yes, the dominance of Google and Facebook is a problem in many ways. It does, there is a kind of a monopolistic effect there. But then the prescription then is completely goes wrong. Because what Soros is saying is, let's censor Facebook and Google. Let's censor them. Let's censor the content so that it is only content that I approve of, that I, George Soros, approve of. That's what he's going to get to here. Just watch. Moreover, because content providers cannot avoid using the platform and must accept whatever terms they are offered, they too contribute to the profits of social media companies. Indeed, the exceptional profitability of these companies is largely a function of their avoiding responsibility and payment for the content of their platforms. The companies claim that they are merely distributing information, but in fact, the fact that they are near monopoly distributors make them public utilities and should subject them to more stringent regulation. Read, what's the word? What I was using a while ago? Stringent regulation. And censorship. Read censorship. Stringent regulation means censorship. Aimed at preserving competition, innovation, and fair and open access. See, this is the net neutrality argument, that we need to have Facebook and Google and other internet. We have to have the whole internet be treated as a public utility. Treating it as a public utility means that it is subject to government regulation. And that is where censorship comes in. And that's what he's advocating here. The purpose is to bring about censorship. He talks about fair and open access as if that's, again, sounds nice, right? But what he's actually talking about is censorship. He said that there has to be they cannot avoid responsibility and payment for the content of their platforms. So if they publish something that he doesn't like, then they'll have to pay for that. The companies, so social media companies' true customers are their advertisers. But a new business model is gradually emerging based not only on advertising but also on selling products and services directly to users. They exploit the data they control, bundle the services they offer, and use discriminatory pricing to keep more of the benefits that they would otherwise have to share with the consumers. This enhances their profitability even further, but the bundling of services and discriminatory pricing undermines the efficiency of the market economy. Social media companies deceive their users by manipulating their attention, directing it toward their own commercial purposes, and deliberately engineering addiction to the services they provide. This can be very harmful, particularly for adolescents. Yes, that's true. So again, Soros is pointing out a problem, but then in the prescription for resolving that problem, he brings in his political agenda, and he says, "See, this is why we need this." So that's where it's wrong. That's where it's wrong. There is a similarity between internet platforms and gambling companies. Casinos have developed techniques to hook customers to the point that they gamble away all of their money, even money that they don't have. Something similar and potentially irreversible is happening to human attention in our digital age. This is not a matter of mere distraction or addiction. Social media companies are actually inducing people to surrender their autonomy. And this power to shape people's attention is increasingly concentrated in the hands of a few companies. Well, George, again, there's a lot of truth to what you're saying, but the way that you want to solve it is that you want the autonomy to be surrendered to you. You want to be able to control what information is going to these people. See, this is the whole problem with the George Soros, this Open Society Foundation. Nice sounding name, right? Open Society has a ring of something. You're talking about something that's transparent, where there's a full participation by everyone. That's the sort of the impression that you get. But what Open Society is actually doing is quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. It's building these vertical superstructures of power, these vertical power structures that control power with the elite, or the focus power at the elite, the concentrate power at the top, where the elite are, where George Soros is, so that his values are transmitted. His values are the values that will dominate the world. That is his purpose here. And remember that this man comes from a very, very questionable background, where he was a member of the SS and where he was helping the SS round up Jews and round up their property. He's an evil man. It takes significant effort to assert and defend what John Stuart Mill called the freedom of mind. Once lost, those who grow up in the digital age may have difficulty regaining it. Soros is the opposite of John Stuart Mill. Classical liberalism was that that you may not agree with someone, but you will fight for his right to say it. Is that what George Soros is doing? Quite the opposite. He wants to censor. He wants to censor. It takes significant effort to assert and defend. We already did that. This would have far-reaching political consequences. People without the freedom of mind cannot be easily manipulated. The danger does not loom only in the future. It played an important role in the 2016 U.S. presidential election. Okay, so there. I guess it wasn't the Russians, huh? It was Facebook and Google. Is that where the left is now going to move their target now? This was published on February 15th, before Mueller's indictment was revealed of the Russians trying to influence the U.S. elections with no proven effect. But now Soros is saying that he says there's actual proven effect by the meddling by Facebook and Google. There's an even more alarming prospect on the horizon, an alliance between authoritarian states and large data-rich IT monopolies, bringing together nascent systems of corporate surveillance with already developed systems of state-sponsored surveillance. That sounds like what Soros is doing. Let's just look at that again. Between authoritarian states and large data-rich monopolies, bringing together nascent systems of corporate surveillance. This is what the left often does, and progressives and fascists such as leftist fascists such as Soros do. They blame others for what they are doing. And for example, the Russia collusion. We can go to an article in a minute where it talks about how Barack Obama was doing exactly what Trump was accused of doing. So Trump was accused of doing something, wasn't doing it. Obama was doing it. So we'll go into that article in a second here. Okay. This may well result in a web of totalitarian control, the likes of which not even George Orwell could have imagined. But that's exactly what George Soros is doing. Same George, different guy. The countries in which such unholy marriages are likely to occur first are Russia and China. Chinese IT companies in particular are fully equal to U.S. platforms. They also enjoy the full support of the protection of President Xi Jinping's regime. China's government is strong enough to protect its national champions, at least within its borders. U.S.-based IT monopolies are already tempted to compromise themselves in order to gain entrance to these vast and fast-growing markets. These countries' dictatorial leaders may be only too happy to collaborate with them in the interest of improving their methods of control over their own populations and expanding their power and influence in the United States and the rest of the world. This article reached to me like a, what do you call it, a CYA article. In other words, Soros is putting this out as if he were a good guy, as if he's the world's protector against this kind of a thing, this kind of a control of populations by authoritarian governments and IT companies in the future. When in actual fact, he's the one who's doing it. But he's putting this out so as to be able to sort of create a plausible deniability for himself, or a CYA. You can look up what that actually means, what it stands for. That's the impression that I get from this article. Let's see, the U.S.-based IT monopolies are already tempted to compromise themselves in order to gain interest to these vast and fast-growing markets. These countries' dictatorial leaders may be only too happy to collaborate with them in the interest of improving their methods of control over their own populations and expanding their power and influence in the United States and the rest of the world. There is a growing recognition of a connection between the dominance of the platform monopolies and rising inequality. The concentration of share ownership in the hands of a few individuals plays some role, but the peculiar position occupied by the IT giants is even more important. They have achieved monopoly power while also competing against one another. Only they are big enough to swallow startups that could develop into competitors, and only they have the resources to invade one another's territory. The owners of the platform giants consider themselves the masters of the universe. In fact, they are slaves to preserving their dominant position. They are engaged in an existential struggle to dominate the new growth. So what are we asking here? What are we asking here? What does he actually want? Does he? Okay, the EU Commissioner for Competition, Margaret Vestager, is the champion of the European approach. Okay, what is the European approach? Okay, here we go. The EU uses a different definition of monopoly power from the U.S. Whereas U.S. law enforcement focuses primarily on monopolies created by acquisition, EU law prohibits the abuse of monopoly power regardless of how it is achieved. Europe has much stronger privacy and data protection laws than America. Moreover, U.S. law has adopted a strange doctrine that measures harm as an increase in the price paid by customers for services received. But that is almost impossible to prove, given that most giant internet platforms provide a majority of their services for free. Moreover, the doctrine leaves out of consideration the valuable data that platform companies collect from their users. The EU Commissioner for Competition, Margaret Vestager, is the champion of the EU approach. It took the EU 7 years to build a case against Google, but as a result of its success, the process of instituting adequate regulation has been greatly accelerated. Moreover, thanks to Vestager's efforts, the European approach has begun to affect attitudes in the U.S. It is only a matter of time before global dominance of the U.S. internet companies is broken. Regulation and taxation, spearheaded by Vestager, will be their undoing. So Soros is championing the EU, which of course he champions in general, because that is the EU is the kind of organization, international, supranational organization that he wants to institute in other areas of the world as well, and throughout the world. And so he is trying to show how the EU right now is better able to deal with the Google and Facebook than the United States is. And so he says the EU is a good thing. And so that is another reason why we should support the EU. Whereas we know that the EU is basically a Soviet system, as the king has said. It's the instead of the USSR, instead of the United Soviet Socialist Republics, which has collapsed, we now have the United Soviet Socialist Republics of Europe. So USSR, whole USSR political model has now moved westward, and George Soros is where the head of the Kremlin's used to be, and so he wants to promote that, and so he's trying to say what a good job EU is doing in fighting Google and Facebook. And yes, there's a problem with the monopolistic control that Google and Facebook have, but George Soros is not the answer. George Soros is not the answer at all. That those monopolies have to be dealt with, and I'm sure they will be dealt with, but not by Soros. If we have if God and His people on earth, people have anything to do with it. All right, so let's look at that article I mentioned where let's see. Okay. Here we go. Soros, another one. This is another one, but the Soros-linked group demands EU accept 540,000 migrants. Sex abuse fraud claims that Soros NGO. Media meltdown over Hungarian plan to tax Soros charitable charities supporting illegal migration. Those kinds of articles we see here. Those are articles linked by Breitbart. Okay. I can't find that article I was referring to in a minute, a moment ago. Mayher says the U.S. is not built for mental health, kind of sick country at its heart. Laura Ingram denies any racial intent in comments about LeBron James' Fox issue statement. Evergreen State College forecasts a 20% drop in enrollment. Doctors Without Borders fires 19 employees for sexual harassment and abuse. Instagram caves to Russian censorship. Former NBA player Steve Nash, Constitution very old, Americans brainwashed to love guns. That seems to be a common theme among, a growing theme among liberal spokespeople. That is that the Constitution of the United States is simply too old to be of relevance to today. That's why it's important that we have a constitution that cannot be amended, because if these people get enough votes, if they get enough power, they're going to amend the Constitution or maybe even eliminate the Constitution and institute a completely new Constitution. Steve Nash, a foreign-born former NBA player, jumped to his Twitter account to slam the U.S. Constitution on Thursday, saying it is very old and Americans are brainwashed to love guns. After 17 people were shot and killed by a deranged teenager at Parklands, Florida's high school, the former Laker took to Twitter to criticize gun rights. Nash, who was born in South Africa and raised in Canada, first said he didn't understand the debate about guns since private gun ownership was clearly not working. The rest of the world is having success prohibiting access to guns. He wrote on Wednesday, I don't see what the debate is about. It's not working here. People are dying at alarming rates. But you saw the Pew Research, where violent crime rate has gone down dramatically over the past 25 years. And yet he says that people are dying at alarming rates. If you value guns more than life and safety, I don't understand. Then after a few more tweets in which Nash disagreed with the statistics fans were throwing at him, the former MVP disputed that a gun in private hands ever saved anyone's life. When's the last time someone had a gun in their home and it saved lives? I'll wait, he tweeted. Nash then insisted that Americans are brainwashed on guns by those who are making money selling firearms. Still waiting on a compelling argument for guns in America. Not one holds water. The brainwashing by those making millions on the gun industry is disgusting yet successful. Absurd to see logic go out the window by many people I'm assuming are loving human beings. He next attacked the U.S. Constitution, saying it was too old and needed to be altered to suit his liberal ideas. The Constitution is constantly being refined and changed. The gun lobby love to preach the good old Constitution. Very old argument. It's not very accurate in reality, he said. Nash then closed his argument, again insisting that the U.S. should throw away its American ideas and eliminate the way other countries govern their people. Well, he was born in South Africa, right? Not very good, actually, for a person born in South Africa to be talking about violence, because South Africa is really in a very, very difficult situation now, because violence is just so prevalent there that it's incredible. Let me Google something here. South Africa. Let's look at the South Africa crime rate. All right. And what do we have here? The murder rate increased rapidly in the late 1980s and early 1990s. Between 94 to 2009, the murder rate halved from 67 to 34 murders per 100,000 people. Between 2011 and 2015, it stabilized to around 32 homicides per 100,000 people, although the total number of lives lost has increased due to the increase in population. How many people were murdered in South Africa in 2016? South Africa's murder rate increased by 4.9% in the last year to move to more than 50 people killed every day. In total, there were 18,673 homicides in the 12 months to March 2016, official statistics show. This is up from 17,805 in the previous year. So a person who was born in South Africa maybe ought to be thinking more about how to solve the murder rate in South Africa. Maybe more guns in South Africa would be a good idea so people could protect themselves, because only bad people have guns in South Africa. Bad people in the police. That's not a good situation. That's not a good situation, because we are our own first responders. There's a saying that one guy on the internet keeps using, and I don't know if he's created it or if it came from someplace else, but I think it's very good. When seconds count, the police are only minutes away. We are our own first responders. That's true, and so we need to have the tools to deal with those situations when we find ourselves becoming those first responders. Now, we are not first responders every day like the police are, or as the emergency ambulance people are, but we have to be prepared for that situation in which we suddenly one day find ourselves to be the first responder. That football coach at in Parkland, Florida, I'm sure he never imagined that he would have to be a first responder in a shooting incident like that, in a mass shooting incident like that. But one day he found himself to be in that position, and he didn't have the tools to respond properly, effectively. All he could do was throw himself in front of the bullets, to catch the bullets, so as to save the lives of others. He laid down his life for the sake of others, for the sake of the students and whoever was standing behind him. And he's an amazing person. And it's just really tragic that that kind of a person was not allowed to have a gun. He could have saved many more lives, perhaps even his own life. And yet this guy, whose country of birth is in terrible turmoil, says that, oh, no, Americans are brainwashed to love guns. It's terrible. Terrible how people are completely deceived by the George Soroses who want to regulate and want to censor the internet so that only their values, only their opinions get published. The good thing, even though Google and Facebook are dangerous monopolies, but the good thing about them is that at least they give people like you and me opportunity to express our views. Now, maybe 99% of the stuff on Google and Facebook is junk. I don't know. I don't know what percentage. Obviously, some people have opinions that are nonsense. That's simply true. But it's our responsibility as consumers of the information to distinguish and to make judgments about those about what we read, and to pick and choose what we are going to go with, how we formulate our own ideas. But it's important that everybody get to express their ideas. Stupid people also have the right to free expression. You cannot deny them that. And even stupid people sometimes say smart things. That's also true. And smart people often say stupid things. That is also true. So you cannot censor the internet. You cannot censor the internet. You got to let it all hang out and just let it filter through. Bad and stupid ideas will pass away naturally, and because they lose out in the free market competition of ideas, and the good ideas will remain. That's what will happen. Soros says, no. The common people are too malleable. They're too much influenced by everything that they read on the internet. That's a process. It's a process that we're going through. But the answer is not censorship. The answer is not censorship. Soros, stop it. Just don't go there. Just don't go there. We're not going to let you regulate our internet. And we're not going to let the EU come and dominate the United States either. All right, we're at the end of our broadcast time. I want to thank everybody for joining us. And happy God's Day once again, in case everybody missed it when I said it the first few times. And hope that you have a wonderful 9th year of Cheongi and a wonderful weekend. Expecting snow here tonight, but the snow, I'm sure, will be well plowed before you come to service tomorrow. So see you tomorrow morning at service either here in Newfoundland or online, where we will have our service at the regular time of 11 a.m. All right? So God bless, Godspeed, and may His kingdom come.